All right, we are back in session. Madam Clerk, item number 20.
Item 20 is from the Administrative Office to conduct the fiscal year 2018-19 recommended budget hearing. Receive presentations on the recommended budget from the CAO and various department heads, and provide the CAO with direction on any requested changes to the recommended budget.
Okay, I'm going to open this budget hearing, and we will have a presentation by the CAO first, and then we will have presentations by departments. So I open the 2018-19 budget hearings.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try and keep it brief. I have a fairly lengthy presentation, but I'm also cognizant of being about an hour behind where I had hoped, and I'm trying to get as many department heads in today as possible so we can have a full day of deliberation tomorrow. The first item that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is this lovely picture. And I bring up the picture because it's important. We did this year a photo challenge. And with that, the goal was, hey, let's do a photo challenge, have the, our county employees, that was one of the main eligible criteria. You had to be a county employee, was submit your photos of the beauty of the county. So we got quite a few submissions, which I was very pleased with. Then we had a judge panel rating score from each of the Board of Supervisors, myself, County Council, Human Resources, the Auditor Controller, and rated those photos. This was our first prize winner, Christy, and I might butcher her last name, so thank you. Christy Canepa, who is in Public Health, Health and Human Services, was the winning submission, and she named this picture Fire and Ice, which is, I think, very aptly named. Beautiful picture, and again, I thank her, and I really thank all of the employees that participated. It's really cool. I'm hoping to also get an opportunity to reuse some of those pictures for some artwork around campus as we're trying to spruce things up. So again, just a thank you for those that participated and for Christy's lovely picture. So then, going on to the little less exciting stuff, but more important, the county administrator's recommended budget. So overview today, I'm going to talk briefly local economic indicators, revenue statistics, the budget request snapshot for all funds, and then also for the general fund specifically. I'm going to talk about notable revenue changes and current cash position, overview of our general fund and the long-term picture, the potential solutions to the overall structural deficit that we'll talk a bit about, and then also because this is the snapshot of the county, the very last piece is making a presentation for a request that I had in my own budget, which was a restructure of the administrative office. Oh. So similar to the departments doing their restructure presentations, I was going to also incorporate that piece.
Mr. Lutzer, could I interrupt for a quick second?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, do you desire us to ask questions during the presentation or at the end of the presentation?
The board members could ask any time if they have a question they want to answer.
Okay, and what about public? So we have a procedure.
We will go through his presentation, and then we will go through presentations from staff. We'll have some discussions at the board, and then open the public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no questions right now, though? Okay. All right, just double checking. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk briefly about, so OpenGov, I know this is something that there's been a lot of talk about. We went live to departments this last April. The internal team had been working since last, really mid-January. And
He doesn't have a copy.
of, oh, I put them right there.
I know, I handed it.
Took his copy, didn't you?
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody took his copies because I left them there.
Here, Clyde.
Thank you.
That would be important. So we, the public portal development, now I will say I would have, and I've touted, would have liked to have seen the public portal development here today, which brings me to the third slide, or the third note, I should say, which is some pain points along the way. Unfortunately, we did run into some pain points. There was a definite learning curve to the system, areas that the team, which is a relatively small team, Barbara Biddick from Information Technology, Rebecca Callan, the Auditor Controller, myself, and then members of my staff. Mostly it was the three, Barbara Biddick, Rebecca, and myself doing a lot of the working on, how this is viewed, what information goes into the actual budget document, and then my staff worked a lot on the OpenGov piece. So we did, that divided the resources enough that we just didn't want to rush the public portal because this is an important component. It's something that I think is going to provide good information, but we're just not there yet to the point that I would like it to be. So certainly we'll have that by final. My hope is July at this point is the target time that we've laid out there. Also working through reporting and then communication between the systems was a challenge. Overall, though, I think this was a very, very positive direction. It was, in some ways, it's so much easier. It's easy to get data out of. It's definitely, once we get that public portal side of it, is going to provide much greater transparency and ease of use for the board, the public, and hopefully as departments get more comfortable with it, departments as well. So moving on then, local economic indicators. So the state's economic forecast at this point, and this comes from the recent legislative analyst's analysis that he or she, whomever it happens to be, does a annual review kind of the state of the economy. Usually I'll trust that better than I will what comes out of Department of Finance, just because they seem to do a pretty consistently good job at the LAO's office. And they're still predicting at this point moderate growth over this next fiscal year, and that's at 2.8%. They're also expecting continued low unemployment, which is currently about 4.3%, which is a tight labor market. And I'll talk a little bit about tight labor market in a moment. The assumption then, which relates to that tight labor market, is notably higher wage and salary growth in 2018 and 2019 at about 6.8%. And prices, the consumer price index, is looking to be about 3.3%. What all of these do show me is kind of it provides reasonable confidence in our local revenue estimates remaining on track and consistent with what we've seen over the last prior 2 fiscal years. Just kind of a note, unemployment, you can see the curve, the green is Calaveras, the blue is California. It's really interesting because typically we trend higher in unemployment than the state, although recently we've edged just slightly below on our unemployment rate in the county. And again, that's up through the first quarter of 2018. Consumer price index, again, as I noted, showing an uptick. The concerns with that, of course, is increased cost of goods, those inflators built into our contracts tied to the CPI, our rents, all of those types of things mean starting to see an uptick in some of those costs. Every year, also talk about where our historical assessed property values are. This is an estimate that was developed based on the assumption of about a 3% growth over the prior fiscal year. We won't know what that, and anything you see in that lower corner down here is going to say estimator or estimate, is when we don't have final numbers at this point. Obviously, we're not going to know that until the assessor closes her roll in the coming weeks, hopefully. Also looking at residential new structure permits, this one showed actually a bit of a decline from prior year. Last year I made the comment that I felt that 2016 was going to be somewhat of an anomaly because of building following Butte fire. You probably saw an uptick in structure permits. You could see we're still up over 2015. What we don't necessarily see yet, obviously, is whether this is a downward trend or just a resetting of where we normally would have been on a normal growth curve, since 2016 was unusually large. Add-on additions or other permits continued to show growth in the additions, and actually the additions went down slightly, but the residential other did go up pretty significantly. Those are your pools, outhouses, those types of ancillary structures that aren't additions to the residence itself. And then on your commercial permits, commercial new buildings still showing at least the continued trend that it was at prior year, staying at that level, growing slightly. Commercial other also showing a good increase for 2017. And then looking at our revenue numbers, the prior areas were kind of your economic indicators. Based on what we're seeing, what do we expect? Do we expect something positive? Do we expect something negative? Overall, the projection seems to be supporting something in a positive direction at this point. Sales tax receipts. Now, sales tax, we're still estimating 17-18 because technically we haven't gotten everything in yet, but based on where we're trending, that's roughly where we expect to be at. And then also from that showing a very moderate change for this next fiscal year. Vehicle license fees, as you can see, over the last 5 years essentially have been pretty flat. This next year we're estimating that to be the same with no real change in those vehicle license fees. Transient occupancy tax rates, we saw a bump this year. Again, I think a good piece to that was the agreement with Airbnb and capturing kind of all of those vacation rentals that we might not otherwise have been capturing. And also I think the tax collector having a concerted effort to do outreach to a lot of the vacation rentals and make sure they're aware that they need to be paying their transient occupancy taxes. Next year, again, we're estimating just slight growth in there just based on what inventory might come in the market. But we're continuing with the assumption that it's going to be at the same rate that it was this year. So that's a summary of kind of the economic indicators and revenue indicators. Are there any questions before I move on from this section?
We're not seeing a bump because of them collecting all this extra money under SB1 with the vehicle license fees?
Because these are vehicle license fees that specifically come into the general fund, we don't see those funds come into a different pot of money that then gets distributed directly through roads and bridges. This is just the
General
vehicle
fund
license
side.
fee portion that comes into the general fund.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you're right. You hear about them increasing vehicle license fees, but it doesn't always go to, it goes to different pots of money, how they divide it up, similar to with sales tax and and a couple other revenue sources that they'll designate certain certain pots that it goes to first. So looking at our budget snapshot, you can see here this is a comparison between fiscal year 17-18 and 18-19. 18-19 is this first column right here on the left-hand side. You can see it broken down by fund in this case. So your general fund, public works, IWM, health and human services. You can see here our recommended budget at this point is $169,686,000, whereas prior year $163,651,000. It's a 3.7% increase roughly. And I will say, if you go back and reconcile, part of the OpenGov process has, I'm a firm believer in any time you implement a new change, it's an opportunity to reevaluate assumptions. One of the things that I felt we weren't accurately reporting some of the activity on, and the auditor agreed, is on some of our special special districts, like our lighting and other districts that were not rolled into the appropriations, even though they really should have been. The way we did it, it still worked, but it just wasn't very clean and transparent, I think. So we, one of the things that we did was make sure that we included all of those funds in there. So your special districts line, and this accounted for what it would have looked like at 17-18, so you at least could compare apples to apples. But that was a change that we did in methodology from prior fiscal year. You'll also see when you're looking at the budget document, in the past it was hit or miss on some of the designated funds. This year you got a basically complete list of all the designated funds, whether they're committed or whether they're restricted, which is a substantial difference, but it really shows you where all those pots of money are that are out there for special use. I thought that was an important piece, again, for transparency. There's been a lot of questions about what money's out there. I think this does a much better job to get it cleanly displayed out there for where those pots of money are. Just a graphical summary appropriations. You can see general fund. If you look at all of our funds, general fund is about 40% of the county's budget, and then health and human services 31%, then public works at 9%, our capital improvements at 9%, and then the others at a smaller level below that. The other area that we're working hard to be doing is breaking down based on activity. It's one thing to say by fund, but the problem is types of activity overlap between funds. For me, if you're looking at it from what does it mean for me, what does it mean for a resident of the county, I think it's very helpful to look at it from what is administration and finance, what is public safety, what is land use, health and human safety. So what this is doing is showing you those buckets of how much of the county budget goes into each of those buckets. That I hope at least provides a better snapshot of what the county is doing, so where that money is going. This same information just displayed graphically. You can see health and human services activities, or health and human safety, I should say, at 32%. And it's important to note that's not just health and human services. It includes things in environmental health, as well as a number of other safety net programs that are important and that are kind of grouped under that category. Land use is the 12%, public safety protection is about 16%, county admin and finance about 12%. So then you can kind of get a picture of where's the money going in terms of activities that we're doing. So that's a snapshot for all funds in the county. The typically what we look at most specifically is the general fund. That's what the board has the most discretion over in terms of how that money is spent. So this now drills down and takes that line item here on this line, the 67 here, and now breaks it down into, here's your 67 again, but now it breaks it down into the individual components. So you can see where, again, county admin and finance, public safety and protection, land use, health and human safety, education, recreation, and community, disaster response and recovery. So what this is showing you is, on your general fund, what are your general fund dollars paying for? So what you're seeing from this graph, 38% public safety and protection, 31% county administration and finance, a whopping 20% for disaster recovery and response, land use, and then health and human safety, and then education, recreation at 1%. Any questions before I move on now to start to talk a little bit about revenue? If not, I will take a drink of water real quick. So you can see total revenue estimate for the general fund is this $58,674,000. Within that, this breaks down what are our sources of revenue. So taxes, roughly $17,570,000, and about 29% of the revenue coming into the general fund. Licenses, permits, franchise fees, and I apologize for this order. It was system derived and not necessarily in highest to lowest, but it serves its purpose. It's in the order of how it is in the chart of accounts, so that's how it arranged it. Licenses, permits, and franchise fees, $2.6 million, which is roughly 5%. And then you can see this intergovernmental revenue, state and federal. These are certainly very large right now because this is going to include your Butte fire recovery, winter storm recovery, and tree mortality funds. Charges for services is $6.7 million, and that's about 11.5%. And then operating transfers in. These are operating transfers in from those designated funds that then offset how much the general fund itself, discretionary funds, have to pay for those services. An example of that would be the sheriff transferring in AB 443 money, or probation transferring in AB 109 money. Those are examples of operating transfers into the general fund.
What is an example of charge for services?
Charge for services if you're charging copies, or if you're doing the marriage license fees, or anything that you legitimately can identify a user of that activity that is allowed by statute, and therefore all the taxpayers don't subsidize somebody who is getting a marriage license per se. Yeah, building permits. Anything when the board comes and adopts fees, that's where that line comes into.
Yeah, Mr. Lutz, the miscellaneous revenue, examples of that?
Let's see, miscellaneous revenue in this case, and I'm trying to remember what miscellaneous revenue is going to be.
$585,000.
I can get back to you on that rather
Okay.
than stop.
Go right ahead.
I know there's a good answer, but I just have to go back and stop to see what category it's under to give you a good answer. I apologize for that. So again, same information, just broken down by a pie chart. Taxes, about 30% of the general fund revenue. Federal dollars come in 18%. State dollars come in 18%. Charges for services, 11%. And then operating transfers in at 13%. So this I felt was particularly helpful to display, and it really shows you the effect, going back to my comment about all these, the disaster funds coming into the budget. So this is a 4-year revenue trend. You can see 15-16 pre-Butte fire, just what our revenue picture looked like, and particularly on the state and federal level. Then you start to see the 60 million, 58 million that we're seeing this year. So again, you could clearly see where revenue's gone up and revenue's gone down. It is important to note, fiscal year 2017-18 adopted budget, this represents the final budget that went in September. So if there are discrepancies between that and what we adopted or what the board changed at mid-year, that's what those discrepancies are. And I think it's a natural question, particularly someone would easily say, what about the Measure C money? We know there was more than that in there. This original budget was constructed assuming $2.1 million in Measure C. So it wasn't trued up or shored up until we got to mid-year budget. For apples to apples comparisons, I don't usually take, that would be called our operating budget. For apples to apples comparison and what the state controller asks for, and therefore what feeds into our system is what the board adopted prior year, not the actuals. And this shows you kind of that trend line mapped out of those revenue trends. Overall, again, our big areas, the blue being this current year, where we're down a bit on federal, we're about the same on state, we're trending about the same, a tad low on taxes, and then operating transfers in, we're actually trending down as well. We did not transfer in as much as we have in prior years. So this is the same information, only now it's expenses instead of revenues. You can kind of see where salaries have gone. Again, 15-16 salaries up to 17-18 and 18-19. You can see the what that trend line looks like. You can also see the services and supplies. So you can see some areas were up, others were pretty significantly, or I should say were significantly up or up, and then others were slightly down on transfers out. The capital assets we were down on this year, and then other charges. Same information on kind of that trend line. Not surprising, salaries and benefits, the biggest cost for the county. Soon behind that, services and supplies, and then everything else drops off to a pretty low level. Okay, so now that's kind of the overview summary. Now this piece kind of starts to get into a little more of the meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts. Are there any questions before I get to that point? All right. So key revenue increases that we had this year. Property taxes, again, assumed roughly 3%. In fiscal year 17-18, that was represented 11.86 million. Next year, it would represent about 12.227 million is what that estimate would be. Now, sales tax assumed 20% increase, but that's off prior year budget. Remember what I had made that comment. We assumed really conservative last fiscal year. Actuals came in much higher. So although we're showing a large increase this year, we were way over budget this year. I think we're trending to come in about 3.1 million this year, 3.2 million. So our estimate for 3.3 million isn't too far off of what our actuals are for this year. And a similar thing for the transient occupancy tax. It is showing a 24% increase off of what we originally budgeted, but we budgeted not knowing what the impact was going to be to the Airbnb agreement, what that was going to look like for us on collection rates. As it is, we've been up pretty significantly. So I think we were trending to end about 730,000. And so this gave us kind of a little bit of an increase just based on what we'd expect. And now key revenue decreases. Excise cannabis taxes, obviously. 2017-18 budget was at 2.15 million. Actuals ended up being 8.603 million. The fiscal year 18-19 estimate is 660,000, and that's based off of the dispensaries. PG&E franchise fees. This has been a very contentious issue. They gave us new methodology calculations this year, conveniently, in addition to Every County. Every County is struggling with this, and in fact, we had a long conversation at my regional CAO's meeting about this, and are working with CSAC and going to be reaching out to RCRC on this, because almost every single county has seen a similar decrease to us, about a 24% decrease in our franchise fees. What they're saying is they used GPS to better map where their infrastructure is, and therefore they're reducing the amount that we're owed through the franchise fees. They did something similar. Council was able to provide information for me in the past. In the 90s, they did something similar, and I believe I know we engaged an attorney. I don't know how far that went. We're still digging into that. But we are working on a statewide work group because this is impacting a lot of counties, and PG&E has not been cooperative at providing us backup details about how they came to their new methodology, which doesn't give us much confidence in how they came about it. So that is an issue. Certainly it's not, the dollar-wise, it's not our biggest line item in the general fund, but it certainly is a large decrease, and for one that we have a disagreement on for how it came about. In terms of our general fund reserve balance, and that was a question that came up earlier, our fund balance as of 6/30/17 was 4.463. We didn't do anything with it in this fiscal year, either a transfer out or a transfer in, and so it's sitting again at 4.463. When calculating that rate, it is at 7.65% of the total fiscal year 18-19 estimated revenue, if you include all of the money we're getting from disaster recovery. If you factor that out, we're at 10.3% of revenues. And then Teeter fund balance, 6.91 is roughly the beginning year fund balance. We have our annual general fund contribution that's always budgeted in there at the 500,000. We also had the mid-year increases that were requested that use 72,840 of that. Our estimated revenue into it this year, I gather in talking with the auditor's office and them working with the tax collector, that people have been paying more of their bills on time this year. Our collection is down by about 50% on Teeter. Normally it's about 1.2 million that we put back into that every year. This year we're estimating, again, this is a complete estimate until we get finals, to be about 675,000, to bring our estimated fund balance to 7.013 for closing the books. So now, overview of general fund and long-term picture. So we are still facing a overall structural deficit. Now, it's important to note, again, we're using fund balance to shore up the budget. We have enough fund balance to cover the budget, and we're not using any other one-time funds such as teeter or reserves. However, when looking at what our costs are for our departments versus our costs versus the revenues coming into the general fund, without the fund balance, we do run this structural deficit. And that structural deficit for 18-19 is projected about 9.261. When we projected last time, it was 5.14, and that was 17-18 final budget. Some of the factors, unexpected revenue was really strong in 17-18. And we're not, Measure C, obviously, 8.6 million was an item, as was the 5.16 million in prior year Butte fire recovery revenue. So we were behind in billing. We had a lot of services that were paid for, that were carried in that year. There was not the decision was made through the auditor that they did not want to set up receivables for this information or for these transactions, so instead they had to be budgeted as prior year revenue. So that absolutely was a strong infusion of cash into the general fund, which helped build where we're sitting today with a high cash carry. So those did let us close budget last year and this year. Clearly, though, that represents huge concern for 19-20 based on spending pattern. What I'm showing here is a recap of what's in the budget, and I apologize it's small on this screen. Again, the blown up detailed version of this is in the budget binder itself, mainly using this to highlight some key areas. What I didn't go through and go through and look at is this shows you with how you read this. So appropriations, this column shows you how much total expenses the department's estimating. This says how much revenue they're going to bring in. If they don't have enough revenue to cover expenses, there's a residual amount here. This is how much general fund that department is needing to use to operate. So what you can see here now is this is current year. This one I'm showing you, I've condensed these two things because all I'm interested on this part is the bottom line. How much general fund are they requiring? You can see a difference line by line of what the department asked for this year and or the CIO is recommending this year, and the department received last year for final budget. And then it shows you the difference and the percent change. So example, admin, last year, 614,000. I'm sorry, this year, 614,000. Last year, 704,000. A difference of a decrease of about 12% in the admin budget. In contrast, you have economic development, 181,000 is their current request. 157,000 was last year's request, representing that 15% increase. What I went through here on this slide is put arrows next to each of the areas that were increasing overall, just to highlight where our increases are to general fund expenditures. When we get to deliberations, I would expect this to at least kind of be something to point to. I gave all board members plus the public a handout that shows a summary of all of the general fund budgets that shows what their 17-18 final was and their 18-19 recommended were, to help go through and see comparisons. Again, I think that will be helpful when we get to the deliberation phase about what the board would like or what changes the board would like to see to this budget. So you can see from this sheet, we have increases in economic development, the assessor, auditor controller, in county clerk, recorder and elections, in council, information technology, and the treasurer tax collector. Overall, as a whole, this group, and this is this bottom line here, this is the county admin and finance section. When you're going back to those, who falls into those buckets, this is the group that falls into county admin and finance. And I realize on the screen, the white text doesn't show up very well. Admin and finance as a whole is down by about 2.5% versus prior year. Next is public safety and protection. You can see we have increases in the grand jury, public defender, OES, the coroner, district attorney, sheriff, the dispatch, the CalNARC enforcement, jail, marine safety, and overall what we're seeing is on the public safety departments, we're seeing roughly a 309% increase in the requests that they're asking for over prior year. Yes.
Looking at the corner, we see a 35.8%.
Yes.
I recall he came mid-year last year and requested more funds. Did we
This,
fix that?
this is the fix of that.
That's the fix of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Is rather
Yeah.
than have him come every year, we funded his contracts based on what he was actually seeing. Unfortunately, and that's exactly the problem we have, is that they keep coming back.
Okay, we won't see that from the coroner's office at least, will we?
Right.
From the coroner's office, you should not be seeing it this year.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Well, hopefully also hold the coroner to that too, because we, we did ask them for
Don't make him
estimates.
too upset.
And then going to the next one, land use, we had increases for ag commissioner and planning, total land use areas up about 56%. Then health and human safety, cannabis regulation is zeroed out. It's in there because that was the 1010 unit where the registration program, regulatory program was being run. It's zeroed out. The public administrator, we had also a increase, smaller increase, also based on contracts. Similar issue with the coroner, though not as large. Environmental Management Agency, we had an increase in animal services, and overall a 5.74% increase for what they were asking for. Education, recreation, communication, or community services, sorry, is increases in the museum and the library, again, fairly small increases. And overall, that category up 2.3%. And then our other big category is is Butte Fire Recovery. Now, going back to my comment about all the one-time monies that were flowing in, you could see our contribution here was prior year at 4.45 million in revenue. Really, that it was, if it's a negative here, it means it's returning revenue back to the general fund. This year still has some one-time monies that are returning revenue to the general fund that we're expecting rollover for invoices that are in that haven't come through yet, but far less because we're more or less caught up and working on maintaining cash flow. I do feel in this budget now, this represents a much more accurate picture of what we feel the program looks like. What this doesn't include is we have some areas that we need to go back and do reversion requests that Michelle hit on in her morning presentation. Those reversion requests, if approved, would then increase these appropriations for those projects. But overall, I feel far more confident with the numbers that we have in here. You'll notice there are more lines just because we're making sure we're getting everything in the right category or bucket. And so that's why it's larger, but overall I do feel far more confident with what the disaster recovery budgets look like. So going back to the summary piece, some of the key salary and benefit increases, we did see roughly a 10.42% increase over last fiscal year. The negotiated MOU increases about 1.185 million, and I know Krista, I think, has a updated sheet that when we get to that point for discussion, she can provide it. We were doing some final calculations when I built this. I did my best estimate based on what I had, and Krista was doing a reconcile for me this morning. We also have added positions, estimated when you factor in salary savings that they expect this year is another 1.06 million, and that assumes that they fill them at halfway through the year. Obviously next year that becomes a bigger problem because then you have the full cost of them, not half-year cost. And then there were miscellaneous step increases, longevity pays that were factored in at about $228,000. We also saw an increase in professional and specialized services of about 7%, or almost $300,000. In special department expenses, also a 37% increase at $351,940. Part of that is some of the projects that we're taking on for remodeling, and some of those actually have revenue attached to them that was already discussed by the board, such as a transfer from Teeter. Travel and training also notably up 41%. At $172,000. And then capital equipment, as I noted before as well, overall was down the amount of capital requests. It was down almost 19% to $266,000.
Mr. Lutz, another quick question. Travel and training, that's 41% increase. Basic definition, why that increase?
Part of it is tied to onboarding new staff and required trainings that you have to send people to. I know a good chunk of it was in the sheriff's budget, and part of it's about having to send new deputies to all the training that they're required to go to. That's going to increase it naturally. I think in general, costs have gone up for travel. Hotel costs have gone up quite a bit. It's if you have to go anywhere that requires a hotel, I know those charges have gone up. And then other types of conferences or continuing education units. Would I expect it to increase? Yes. Would I expect it to increase as much as it has? I think that's a little high and warrants looking at. You know, the unfortunate thing is, again, at $172,000, it helps, but it's not going to make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. But I do know that, again, with onboarding a lot of new staff, that means they're having to do travel and training, and it's where it's being offered. You don't have as much choice, and it's far more costly to bring it here.
Thank you.
Tim?
Yes?
I don't want to throw you off your game, so if this is coming
No,
later,
please.
just throw it up. I was looking at the key revenue, and I'm sorry I'm going back in time, but sometimes brain catches up. You have here in the budget, we collected, in September of last year, we budgeted about $8.6 million in Measure C money to keep things going. You have here in 2018-19 estimated $660,000 based upon dispensaries. Didn't we collect money in December and January of this year in Measure C taxes? And where are they in the budget?
That is in that 8.6.
That was in there?
In December. That's why I said my budget assumed 2.1 million because that was how much we collected up to that point.
Right, is it July 1?
But then because of that second grow cycle and collection cycle, that was all still brought into this year's budget because the budget would end June 30. Since that was all still December January, and February. That's all in this year's budget.
How much do we put in at the end of September budget of Measure C?
Last year?
Yeah.
We budgeted 2.1. That was how much we had, that's how much we had
That's right,
collected at that
because in
point.
June we didn't put it in at all,
Yeah.
but we put in later. Okay, I got you.
So, looking now to the harder conversation, obviously, we need to find what those long-term solutions might be. The county's been engaged in evaluating business process and service activities, and this has been an ongoing process since I've been here, since we've been having these discussions. We're reviewing those revenue-producing activities. Really looking at those internal service departments and trying to identify, what are our service goals, and therefore what do we want to pay for, what do we not want to pay for, and having those types of discussions. The fee schedule, although again is important where we can recover. That's, obviously we're not going to balance a budget on it, but we are going to make sure that we're recovering everything that we can. This is particularly key in environmental health, in the building department, where we can really be maximizing kind of that, recover our costs. Environmental health did take a large change to the board this last fiscal year, and building is working with a consultant on their structure and anticipate bringing one. And then other departments are at various stages of evaluating their fees. We're also working strongly on economic development activities. I think areas like looking at what we might be able to bring in from state and federal level to enhance local activities, make us more attractive for businesses. Those are the things that will help. Obviously, that's a very long-term horizon picture. And then something that I think we can certainly do better at is evaluating opportunities to leverage department strengths with one another. And not to say that we're not doing okay. There are some departments that work really well together and support one another. But I think ways that we can share resources. I know in the past we tried to share some resources with DA, Animal Services, and somebody else that code thing. That one might have been a little challenging, but I like the out-of-the-box thinking, trying to find ways to make things work. Hoping to do something similar with a department analyst that's a kind of a key budget and finance person that we're requesting for planning, or I should say building, that has the potential to assist planning as well. Again, trying to start to look at what our activities are, how can we do better, and also get reporting out. The harder discussion is, and the fastest way to make any of these changes is freezing or deleting vacant positions. But my cautionary note there is, to do that, I do think there needs to be a deliberative process about what services are provided and what services can't be provided. Because I genuinely do feel in a lot of cases across this campus, we have departments that are very lean staffed, and reducing staff levels without decreasing services might not be completely feasible. And so that needs to be a discussion that certainly is gonna take time, and it's gonna have to probably be facilitated with a couple of key homework things to come back and bring back a report and an analysis. But I say that then to put that note out there of, to do that, we also have to make sure that we're not putting unrealistic expectations on the staff that are remaining to be able to meet the current service levels. Those are the only things for the actual budget presentation. As I said, I have a presentation to kind of overview my office restructure proposal. I don't know if you want me to go into that now or if you want to go to questions at this point.
We continue
So what I'm requesting is a pretty significant personnel restructure of my office. What I would be doing is deleting the assistant CAO position and then reclassifying the principal admin analyst position and senior admin analyst position to deputy county administrators. And then I would add a deputy county administrator position for solid waste and water policy. The theory then with adding that position is that the assistant CAO could then bump into that position and oversee solid waste and also the water policy for the county. That would then be 90% charged to integrated waste management and 10% to admin. It would also reclassify the administrative assistant 2 position to an executive assistant to the CAO. There's no salary change associated with that, more as reflecting what the actual job duties are, as the current administrative assistant is nearing retirement at the end of this year. The goal is to try and set this up now so that when we recruit, I can be recruiting for specifically the type of skill set that I'm looking for in that position. And then also then to add an administrative analyst position to assist on budget and the purchasing function. So visually, and again, unfortunately, this is a little hard to see, but visually this represents, didn't mean to do that, how the office is currently structured. So CAO, you have the assistant, appointed department heads. I just had a note over here as kind of that indirect supervisory piece for the appointed department heads. And then kind of the scope of what my office oversees. So you have information technology, human resources, facilities, OES, economic development, the analyst team, which does budget, legislation, policy, AP, AR, the hearing office, the purchasing function that kind of gets picked up through the analyst team. The capital improvement project also kind of gets picked up. Public defender contract administration, airports, and public access TV. The issue on the structure is one, kind of the layered structure. There's a lot of kind of line staff or then management line managers, and not very much ability to kind of differentiate and focus on certain key areas. The issue is responsiveness and being able to make sure certain things are being taken care of, where I can't delegate as many functions, say to purchasing, as I could to a deputy. Otherwise I run into significant working out of class issues. The goal being then to make a leaner, flatter, I should say, organization. And so under the flatter organization, getting rid of the assistant CAO, you now create where you have a deputy CAO that is a general services type of position that can oversee facilities and maintenance, purchasing, your capital improvement projects, and then a budget and policy position that can oversee your budget, that can oversee your certain contracts like the public defender contract. And then again, here's where you have the deputy CAO for solid waste, overseeing integrated waste management, water policy and management. And then you provide a little more diffused structure that allows easier delegation of certain responsibilities and better responsiveness, particularly with taking on solid waste, having a backup for Brian. If I'm not here and for some reason Brian's not here, to be up here or to oversee the office becomes more challenging without having another type of a deputy or using the deputy CAO model. You're kind of split on counties. This structure is mirrored after Tuolumne County in terms of how they operate. It's mirrored after, again, a number of other counties that are either already at this or going to this model because of the advantages. My feeling is, given the smaller size of the county, I don't know that having a higher level assistant CAO is the most appropriate course. So what is this going to cost? The net effect actually is a $36,000 savings to the administrative budget, and that's on the personnel. And I think that's important, again, to point out in that the goal here is not to add to the general fund problem, if anything, to try and solve it, and recognize that under the current structure with the number of duties that are under the administrative office, some things are not being done to my level of satisfaction, particularly on the purchasing side, the capital improvement side. Staff have been working very hard at trying to get those online and functioning properly, but there's a fine line on how much I can give them without being too much. There are other personnel changes in my budget that I would have had better savings, unfortunately, but I am assuming 50% of the hearing office clerk because of the 8.06 hearings that we'll be doing for general abatements, assuming the board passes the changes that are coming back in July for 8.06. I am seeing some salary savings from retirement of a long-term employee with a lot of seniority and longevity. So total salaries and benefits are being reduced by about $53,150 through my budget. My changes in my FTE, and I realize it was on the one chart, I should have clarified this better. Fiscal year 17-18, I have 6 FTEs in administration. 18, and that should have said 18-19, not 18-18, is actually 6.1 FTEs because 10% of the deputy CAO over integrated waste and water policy would be charged to my budget. The rest would be correctly charged in the IWM budget outside of the administrative budget. So the increase that this proposal would do is 0.1 FTEs. So given that there is a savings and revenue neutrality to this proposal, my request is that the board do approve this restructure when we get to that point. So in closing, for the overall presentation, again, I want to acknowledge the board, one, for their continued support, for their willingness to let us implement a new system in the middle of the budget, this budget cycle. It's been a really crazy budget cycle, and I'll be looking forward to having some sleep when all's said and done. But it's also at the same time, I think, once we get the kinks out, once we identify the pain points, it's going to be far better. I also want to thank the auditor controller. She was instrumental in making this transition with the system possible, and also for being very collaborative during this budget cycle. Information technology and all of information technology, but specifically also Barbara Biddick for her tireless hours. There were many a times that emails were going back on trying to get this system to be operating at 1 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning as we were trying to get things smoothed out and taken care of and ready for prime time, so to speak. My office staff, again, tremendous work, working long hours, trying to make sure that all of this information got in there correctly. Human resources and risk, also a much more collaborative process that we worked out this year, where we got to work as that budget team, try and make sure that we don't miss anything and hopefully result in fewer errors. And then, of course, department heads and fiscal staff for meeting with us, taking the time, working with myself, my staff, being as accommodating as they could be, and overall being willing to embrace this new system, albeit sometimes reluctantly. So with that then, those are my recommendations. Conducting the public hearing, receive my presentation, provide direction on those changes, and then June 26th, it'll come back for the board to adopt the budget with those requested changes, the position change resolution, capital asset resolution, and special district designated fund resolutions.
Supervisor Olvera, your lights on?
It is, Mr. Chair. Quick question, Mr. Lux, on your reorganization. So as I understand it, you're going to add one FTE, and you're going to save $53,150.
Yes.
And you're going to be, is it promoting or just name change or?
Some of both. So in the
Some of
case
both?
of my assistant, obviously we are deleting the position. That would mean a demotion to a deputy CAO position.
Is there going to be any incurred costs for training, i.e. computer systems, software, new computers? Is that going to be a factor?
There would be a new computer if and when we got to the point of hiring the additional analyst position, which was accounted for in the budget.
And if there'd be any location changes, that'd be taken care of under the facilities budget, is that correct?
Location changes.
Offices, partitions, whatever.
Yeah, it would, if it was directly in the admin budget, it would actually be in the admin budget, but we wouldn't anticipate that. That wouldn't be that wouldn't be an incurred cost that we'd be expecting. We built out more cubicles like in the OES area. I feel confident that we have space.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Supervisor Mills, your lights on?
Yes, thank you. Tim, we looked at about a $2.1 million mid-year salary savings.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the number right in front of me, but that,
Believe it.
my guess is you do, and yes.
Are you estimating what it will be at year end?
Yes, at year end, I should have pulled that number and I will have that for you for tomorrow.
Okay. The 26 FTE total that you've listed in your request is going to increase the budget by what amount?
The estimate that we're doing on increasing that budget is,
Because this is all over various departments. Trying
and I think, Krista, do you have the final reconciled list that, and I will say that 26 FTE.
That's what I didn't see here.
Yeah, that 26 FTE is going to be across the entire county. What we were specifically looking at right now in this case was what had the general fund impact and general funded departments, which is what I asked Krista to do an analysis on as well.
Excellent. While they're doing that, we expended $500,000 on transit, if you recall, to make up
Yes.
for a shortfall. Are we going to be able to recover that $500,000?
Are we talking about last year's $500,000? Most of it. There was some residual, I want to say about $15,000 that was remaining the last I heard. Yeah, is that about right? The more questionable piece is going to be this year, and when we close this year because of, yes, it will. I
That's
mean,
my point.
probably in the $250,000 to $300,000 range is I think a risk exposure.
Well, as both of us, Supervisor Tuff and I, myself, sit on COG, is something we're very aware of. And just so the rest of the board understands that that's going to be a hit. Yeah, I'm interested to see what the numbers are when you take all of the additional positions that have been requested, as to what that cost is.
Did Clyde get a copy or did we not get a copy?
Going there.
Do we have copies for them? And for the public? Okay.
There should have been 8 in that.
Another question would be is that how many of these general fund positions that were not filled last year are still in the budget for this year, and maybe we should consider pulling them out of the numbers because it looks like we're possibly not going to fill them at all.
So if I'm understanding the question, so the positions that have been vacant for longer than a year specifically, not one that necessarily had,
No.
okay. I don't know if Judy's in here now or not, to know even how easily that type of report could be run.
I don't have it with me, but I can get one together.
Thank you. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Yeah, we did list the order, and the sheriff's office was the first up for their presentation.
Being requested a short break, we'll take a 5-minute break.
That'll work.
All right, we're back in session, and we will start with the sheriff's presentation. Mr. Macedo, Captain Macedo.
Good afternoon, Jim Macedo, Sheriff's Office. A couple of quick introductions. Obviously, the Sheriff, Rick DiBasilio, doesn't need much of an introduction, but he is here. He'll handle some of the questions today. And the Sheriff's Office Business Administrator, Maria Hinsey, who's largely responsible for the bulk of the work in our budget, will also be taking and possibly answering some questions. We have a very short PowerPoint. I know certain members of the public and the board have been through some of our longer budget presentations today. Depending on questions, should be relatively short. We have a total of, I think, 7 slides. That includes the header slide and the question slide, so it's going to be pretty short. We did meet with the CAO and his staff to try and work through some issues and some disagreements, and we've found a certain amount of common ground, although I will tell you the Sheriff's Office asked for significantly more than we are receiving, and we'll talk about some of those requests and how they're going to move into the following fiscal year as it relates to positions and some equipment. First slide, please. So this is just a overview of the sheriff's vehicle requests. The first item is just our patrol cars that we're requesting. These are marked sheriff's patrol vehicles. We are requesting 4 of those. Those are general fund requests for a total of $289,000. We are in need for a new boating safety truck. We are going to pay for that truck with AB 443 Rural Sheriff's Funds for a total of $85,600. The next item is unmarked detectives vehicles. There's 4 of those. Those are broken up. We're requesting 2 of those be paid for by the general fund. 1 is going to be paid for by asset forfeiture funds, and the bottom one there is going to be paid for by Assembly Bill 443 funds. The next vehicle is a supervisor for the investigations in marijuana and/or marijuana unit. We are in need of an additional vehicle. We have a supervisor right now with a very high mileage vehicle. That is a general fund request for $68,000. And then lastly, we have 2 unmarked utility vehicles. That is also to offset 2 supervisors' vehicles that have very high mileage that also respond to call-outs after hours. And those are Assembly Bill 443 for a total of $98,300.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Is it okay if I ask some questions? Yeah. I just want to make sure that that way I'm following along. On the supervisor vehicle, is that the truck, F-150 truck? Do you recall, or is that a different vehicle?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm following along.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay.
The cost of those vehicles, if anybody in the public or the board is wondering why they're so high, that also comes with all of the emergency operations equipment, including radios, computer systems, sirens, light bar, those type of things. And then it also, some of those vehicles include some cages. We are not allowed to store unlocked firearms in our vehicles. It's now a misdemeanor, so we have some built-ins within the vehicle to store some specific equipment that we don't want getting stolen or misplaced.
Captain, thank you for coming. Captain, on the vehicles, are these going to be replacing any vehicles?
Yes, they will be.
And the radios, lights, cages, computer systems, can they be used in the new vehicles or are they purchased new?
So these are all purchased new. We do maintain those and use some of the stuff for salvage parts, albeit not in the new vehicles, but if we have damage to other vehicles, so we do have a surplus. Some of the technology changes significantly. Some of these vehicles that we're replacing have well in excess of 200,000 miles on them, and they're a very old vehicle. The radio technology has changed significantly since it was put in there. So while it's no longer able to be transferred in the new vehicles, and we do that if we have a vehicle accident where a vehicle's totaled, we will transfer newer equipment into newer vehicles, but we are not in the business of transferring old equipment into new vehicles just because of maintenance and problems associated with the vehicle working with the new equipment.
Yeah, thank you.
Captain, I got a question.
Yes.
On your computers that you're adding to these vehicles, are these tough books on a cradle?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on vehicles? Okay. Next slide. Next, and this is one of our more important slides of the presentation, these are our academy positions. So the Sheriff's Office has a known vacancy rate, which will be outlined in a slide in a moment, and we are having some success at recruiting new people that are newly interested in law enforcement, both locally, people that reside within Calaveras County, and people from outside of Calaveras County. They are expressing a far more greater interest in coming to work for us than those that have already gone through a police academy or those that are already working for a law enforcement agency. A lot of that is due to pay. I'm not going to go down that road right now. That's neither the time nor the place. But this is where we are seeing some success in our recruitment. So what we are trying to do, because we are losing people for a variety of reasons, which I'll touch on in a moment, but we are trying to feed more people in, okay, on the front end through the academy, so that when we do lose people, we are not staffing our shifts and our assignments below safety standards or minimum standards as it relates to patrol deputies. So we're trying to put more people into the system. That way, when we do lose people or people do promote, we are not having a 6 or 8 month lag time on trying to get those positions refilled. I won't go back into the length of time with this board. I believe they're all fairly well educated on how long it takes us to hire staff, whether as it relates to our backgrounds, but I do want to touch on that. Those academy positions are not easy to come by. The agencies, we have to kind of compete with other agencies to even get those slots. That's very difficult to do when the county hasn't approved the budget positions. That's where your elected sheriff can come in and call his fellow elected sheriffs. So we have to kind of scratch and claw to get those positions saved for us. We've been successful in doing that. So we have 10, we want to put 10 people into the academy. 10 sheriff's recruits. These are new people not employed by the sheriff's office that do not have full-time law enforcement experience. However, they could be a sheriff's intern who is an unpaid intern. And then we have one limited term position, which that is a flexible position that we may come back to the board and ask that to flip that into a recruit. And that is if we decide to take an individual currently employed by our department and put them in the academy. There's a little bit of a cost difference because they maintain benefits. We don't want to penalize our employees, having them jump from, say, the jail to patrol, and they all of a sudden have to lose their benefits and risk losing their job by going into the academy. So that's something we worked with Human Resources on a few years ago to fix, and it's been successful to that point. Yes?
Captain, I don't want to get into this because I'm sure you've told us this before.
Sure.
But when we send someone through an academy, do they have an obligation? I mean, when ROTC paid for me to go to school,
Yeah.
I owed them 5 years afterwards.
Yes. So we do have a promissory expense note that they sign and agree to reimburse us for academy and training costs should they leave. And I can tell you we have recovered those costs from some employees that have left, and we're currently in the process of doing that now with one particular employee.
Thank you.
Sure. The academy expenses for the academy itself are roughly $55,000 that's if all 11 positions were approved, and that covers everything from uniforms, firearms, their salary, and the academy costs. Any questions on academy positions or why we are headed down that path?
Captain,
Yes.
one quick question. Is there any lodging or any per diem or costs or anything when we send somebody to the academy?
Things have changed. Supervisor Oliveri, you used to be required to live at the academy and the barracks and experience all of that, that enjoyment. Most academies are academy attendees are commuter attendees, so we do not have housing costs. We do not incorporate that in there. We require them to have their own housing, pay for their own meal expenses.
Okay, thank you.
How many people do you have in the academy right now?
4?
You have 4, and those are funded. Do you have any funded positions beyond that from
Yes.
last year?
Many.
So
15.
15.
15.
So you're asking, in addition to those 15, these 10 or these 11?
No. So let's step back for a moment. So we have 4 that are going to be graduating from the academy next month, okay? And we are asking to put 11 more into the academy. We currently have 15 vacancies overall, so the math matches up.
Yeah, okay, but my question is, do you have openings, do you have funding right now in the current year?
Yes.
For more than the 4 that are in the academy?
Yes.
You do. How many
Yes.
of those do you have?
It would be 11, but we also have a significant amount of salary savings. The CAO touched on that
Yes,
briefly.
I'm aware of that.
So yes, there's plenty of money, salary savings to pay for those. However, keep in mind, we are ending the fiscal year, so we're talking about next year's budget.
Correct, okay.
Captain, you touched on salary savings, so I'm just going to ask the question now. And that is that how much salary savings do you see that you'll be at by year end?
So I'll let Ms. Hinsey answer that question. I believe it's a moving target, and I'll let Ms. Hinsey answer the question.
At this time,
Can you turn on your microphone?
I have a forecast.
Maria, can you turn on your
Oh,
microphone?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Not from there.
Not from there, turn on the other one. There you go, now we got you covered.
Even
Stereo.
better, thank you. I actually have a forecast as to the return, the expected return to the general fund on each of the major general fund areas. So I have it in a broader paintbrush than what you're asking. But I am forecasting to return from within the patrol budget, which is our main budget. When I get to the right page. I'm sorry to delay.
Do you possibly want to look it up later and get back to me later on that?
We'll get you a solid number. It was approximately 600,000.
It is. I'd like to be able to find it at this moment, but I'm not finding it.
And that's just
Supervisor
pa-
Mills, go
That's
ahead.
just patrol?
We have the numbers broken down between patrol and the jail
Yeah, if I could
specifically,
get
so I'll
both.
let her search for that. But since you brought it up, that is an important topic to bring up because this is part of the negotiations and conversation we had with the CAO's office. So that money is going to be swept away from the sheriff's office and put back into the general fund for expenses. Now, some of that could be coming back to the sheriff's office, but I do think it's important for the board and the public to understand that money doesn't automatically return back to the sheriff's office, nor are we allowed without question to just utilize that funds to do with what we want back at the sheriff's office the following fiscal year. You and I have had some conversations publicly about the benefits of incentivizing cost savings within agencies to be able to reutilize those at a later date when we have purchases. I talked to the CAO about that. I still think that's a path the county needs to look at. I don't want to overstep the board's authority. However, I do think there's some significant benefits in taking a look at that, probably not during budget hearings, but at another time.
Thank you.
Do you have your numbers? Okay.
Captain, one quick question. How many people do you have assigned to patrol? How many slots?
That is a moving well, slots, I think we're at 24. Yeah,
24 assigned positions?
24 patrol slots according to our current schedule, non-contract slots.
Okay.
Those
How
are
many,
general.
how many do you have filled?
It really depends on the given day, Supervisor Oliveira. I don't know where we're at. I would have to firm that up for you. 19, it generally floats around 19, but we've had some people leave within the last week, and we've had to move some staff into some contract positions and back and forth.
So we're not filling on the beats.
Actually, let me answer this. Let me answer it this way, because this is probably a lot more telling. We are at bare minimum staffing, and we're actually below that, and we're having to fill it with overtime. So we're having a problem, and that's part of the problem with our position allocations. We are always at bare minimum staffing according to our policy and safety standards, and we're constantly below that when somebody leaves because of all the moving parts that need to occur. And the problems relating to that are we're driving overtime up, and we're tiring staff out.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a follow-up question to that, just because I want to make sure it's clear for the record, and in terms of the staffing, the issue is more because of the vacant positions in addition. I mean, it's not that your total allocation is so low that you're in danger. It's that because of all the vacant positions and keeping the people that puts you on that edge. Is that a fair statement? We are understaffed, and when it comes across the board to total sheriff's office positions, and that's another study session that the board's well aware of. Compounding that problem is we are short-staffed within our allocated positions. During the recession, we lost a significant amount of positions. Some of those did return with grants, but we are still understaffed when it comes to general fund county positions. Contributing to that, we are suffering from a significantly high known vacancy rate, and that is compounding the problem across multiple divisions, but specifically patrol and the jail and a little bit in dispatch. Did you get a chance to read my report in the narrative summary?
Which part are you referencing?
On the CAO recommended piece, where I kind of compared staffing rates across.
Yes,
our
Supervisor
comparison
Mills, and
counties.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lutz, yes, and if you're referring to the graph, your graph is unfortunately way off and way out of date. When you're talking about population versus deputy, that standard is no longer being used. It wasn't being used in 1997. You're more interested in response times than per person, per deputy, per population, if that's what you're referring to. So I didn't know you were putting that in there. Had I known, I would have contacted you early on, and that is not very contemporary. That is very outdated and not modern law enforcement. That's not how we staff things.
Okay.
So, Captain, not to belabor the point, is that you've been carrying a 20% vacancy rate as of June of this year?
Let's jump to the next slide.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question, or maybe a couple forward.
I think it's a couple forward.
Can you jump forward again, please, Marie? Right there. Okay, so this is for patrol deputy sheriffs. So between May 2015 and May 2016, we had an average vacancy rate of 17 employees out of 58 funded positions, or 29% if you're a percentage person. The following fiscal year, it was at 18. However, we saw a small bump and increase in positions. That was due to us obtaining some grant positions. And then 17, 18, you could see another drop in funded positions. We had lost some grants or a specific grant that timed out. And we had the marijuana, absorbing some of the marijuana staff, and our vacancy rate was at 19%. So the average over that three-year period is 26%. Now, if you're 26% of 10,000, that number is much easier to manage, but when you're 26% of that low number, I think that demonstrates the point I was making earlier, whereas it significantly impacts the divisions more so when you're looking at 26% of 50 people being gone as opposed to 1,000. Yes.
Captain, when we voted in some significant pay raises for deputies
Yes.
this year, are you seeing is that working? Are we gonna fill these spaces up? I mean, we added a big chunk of money to the general fund expenses to existing positions. Is it working so far?
So I'm going to briefly answer that, but the sheriff has spent a lot more time working with staff on that, and the union specifically. So I'm going to have him answer the bulk of that. But here's what I can tell you, Supervisor Garamendi. That percentage number jumped out at me because I've been here for a long time. and I think it was a significant raise. The problem is the deputy's hourly rate is so low that when you're talking about 15% of $23, it is only equating to about $3 an hour more. And when you can drive a short distance away and almost double your pay, that is what's really going on. They were appreciative of the raise, don't get me wrong, and I don't want to speak for any of the unions, but while that percentage seems high, and it is high, the dollar rate that these deputies are making is so low when it's compared to our competitors, and that's really what you have to look at. It did not have the cause and the desired effect that I think the board was hoping for and we were hoping for. So no, they've left in significant numbers since the raise.
Yeah, I believe if you recall, there was a letter sent to all the board members from a deputy that has been here for 21 years, and he was very specific in his letter that it was a little too late, or too little too late, basically, is what the bottom line was. He keeps, and again, it doesn't reflect on you folks because you haven't been in your chairs for that long, but the time frame that as I was a DSA president for many years, continually asking for raises and raises, we never got them. Everybody else's raises kept going up, and our deputy stayed the same. If you go to Placer County, the way that theirs is set up is that they have to stay at a certain rate above 6 departments that they are compared to at all times. So even when we were staying stagnant back in 2008, 9, 10, and so on, other departments were getting raises. Placer County was also getting raises. Bottom line is, we haven't seen the raises that other departments have. And I've said it before, as a sergeant, I could have went to Amador County and made $10 an hour more. So when you look at a retrospect, as a sergeant, I ended up being a 17% raise. It's about a $3 or $4 an hour raise. It's still $6 an hour less than going across the river. So it just goes back to the pay is low, and a lot of these folks know that, and our attrition rate is going to continue until we fix that. How we fix that, I don't know.
Captain, a question would be, in terms of strategy, I wasn't hesitant when I was in business to headhunt. Is there a strategy that could be incorporated here that you could use?
Yes, so the sheriff's office has been in discussions with the CAO's office as well as internally to look at bringing in a marketing firm. It's a little bit unconventional when it comes to law enforcement. And I want to be clear, this is not a headhunting firm. This is not a hiring firm. This is a firm that basically with experience in selling a product. And what we've learned in law enforcement is we're competing against other law enforcement agencies for staff. And with what salaries are in California, especially in the Bay Area, which we are close to, and believe it or not, we do compete with the Bay Area, we need somebody to come in and sell Calaveras County. We've been surveying applicants and surveying people, and I know HR has done some work as well. But what we've found is we really suffer from a lack of identity, specifically the Calaveras County overall. People don't know where it is. People even in Stockton and Modesto, especially under a certain age, have no clue where this county even is. Therefore, they're not even going to apply to come here because they think it's in some far-off land. We've had some issues with our website, and so basically I could spend, and we will be coming to you with a package, but we've developed a request for expression of interest. Internally, it's done. It's going to the CAO's office this week to form a committee to try and look at actually bringing some firms in. We did bring a couple of firms in early on, asked them to take a look at us for free and just tell us what they think they could do for us. They showed us some comparisons, granted non-law enforcement comparisons, and I can tell you there's one county, and I'm sorry to step aside, but I think this is funny. There is one county that this firm did some work for as it relates to tourism, not law enforcement. And I happen to know this county fairly well, and it is in the far northern reaches of this state, and it makes Calaveras County look like, it makes us look incredibly metropolitan. It is a very rural county, and nobody vacations there, and the stuff they did for that county made it look beautiful. I wanted to go there after I got done watching the thing. They did a fantastic job with this particular county. So I was encouraged by talking to them and listening to them. One of the firms we spoke with had a little bit of experience with some law enforcement. So, and if this works well, this could end up being a trend in law enforcement. I'd like to be on the front end of this as well as opposed to the back end. on getting this firm in there to take a complete look at everything we're doing and just basically kind of peel us back and say, this is where what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong, and we'll bring that back to you, but we're going to utilize AB 443 funds to do this.
You don't have any thoughts to lay anybody off, do you?
That depends on the results of the vote today, but no. And to answer your question, our anticipated salary savings is roughly $839,000 at the end of the year across all budgets, and that does not include encumbrances, the funds where we have expenses this year that aren't going to come in till next year. And Maria, if you want to elaborate on that, you're more than welcome to.
The return to the general fund is expected to be about mid-800s, 800,000, and that would be for all funds available to return back to the general fund across all of our general fund budgets.
Thank you.
Captain, I know we're not down to brass tacks yet, and we'll start going through all that. So this is kind of a broad question, but we've got those 15 slots, and as you pointed out, we're having a heck of a time filling them. Whatever our vacancies are, we're having a hard time. So in your request, we talk about more positions. Assuming we've got a zero-sum game and only so much money, would it be better if we had extra money instead of putting them to positions, putting them in, figuring out some mechanism to incentivize and fill those spots? Because you clearly have a crisis.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure what the right way to go about it is.
Yes.
Because they don't do us any good if they're not filled.
Yeah, the sheriff's working with Human Resources on an incentive program for staff. And I want to be clear, we're recruiting people, but we're not retaining them for a couple different reasons. And some of it's our own doing. Some of it, these people aren't meeting our standards and we're letting them go. We cannot, start to lower our standards in this line of work or we're going to end up costing the county a lot of money with lawsuits and, employee and personnel problems, which are by nature inherent in this business. But nevertheless, so there's some people that aren't meeting our standards and we're letting them go. And there's been quite a few. But there's also people that are leaving because the job market right now, if you are even a remotely decent law enforcement candidate, now is a great time to be looking for a job in the state of California, and particularly in this region right here. And to answer your question, we need a multi-prong approach. We need to look at pay, we need to look at recruiting, we need to look at obviously adding positions, but the positions that we need to add are specifically positions on the front end where we are showing some success. That way when we fix the other problems maybe relating to pay, then we won't have to stuff so many people in the academy. Maybe we can recruit a couple of laterals or some academy graduates. Even some of the academy graduates from Calaveras County don't want to work in Calaveras County. There's just not enough pay to keep them here at that young age. And lastly, if I can just touch back on the marketing firm real quick. The United States Army does a fantastic job with their marketing. I've watched them over the last couple of years. They know their environment. They know they're looking for young men and women of a certain age that have a certain kind of based education. And if you look, they go to high school football games. They're sponsoring Under Armour hockey games, football games. They're doing all their advertising in targeted fashions that are looking for young men and women. We're not doing that in Calaveras County. And one of the options that these firms have is geofencing our advertising. So should somebody come to Calaveras County, they can actually target them with advertisements on their phone. And one of the things I did not know until talking to this firm was with young millennial types, if you want to hire them, if they cannot do it on their phone, they're not going to do it. So we want to advertise to them on their phone while they're here for a concert or while they're sitting bored at home with their folks and try and catch them and bring them here that way and in that fashion. And this geofencing, and I don't know a lot about it, but it's targeted electronic monitoring using social media and the website. It's kind of similar to when if you look to buy a broom on Amazon, the next time you open the internet, you've got 10 brooms. You can't get away from brooms. Every time you flip a page, you've got somebody trying to sell you a broom. That's the thing. We want to sell Calaveras County, sell the sheriff's office through this targeted marketing, through geofencing, and we don't think we have the capabilities to do that internally in the county, so we need to hire a professional firm to help us with that.
Do we recruit from the Army?
We do. We have several ex-Marines in our agency. We've reached out. We just
Excuse me,
had a
Captain, those are former Marines.
former Marines. I was told there is no such thing as a former Marine.
No, there is no such thing as an ex-Marine.
Yeah,
That
okay, I'm
is the
sorry,
next
I'm
one.
sorry. And we just lost a great employee. He was a sergeant, he was a retired major from the United States Army, well-decorated guy, had done some amazing things in his previous career, and he's retired, living a good life and well-deserved, so, yes, we do. Can we go back 2 slides, please? So with patrol, these are requests for new staff. One is a Sheriff Services Technician 1 to assist our property room manager and crime scene investigator. The cost is laid out before you, and that position, based upon our recruiting and hiring, would not start till September 1st, and that's if we're successful. That is one position we have not had a hard time recruiting for. I think based upon television shows, everybody wants to be a crime scene investigator these days. We've had a lot of success in hiring local Calaveras County kids that went away, obtained their education, and came back. Our last 2 CSIs have been just that. Fantastic, young, hardworking ladies. The district attorney's office stole one of them. I'm still not happy with her over that, but we have a great lady working for us now. The next is 2 sheriff's investigators. These are going to be general fund positions. We are very short with detectives right now. We're short. We have a couple of detectives out on due to injuries. We were short beforehand. When we were down to 2 detectives a few weeks ago, and both of them got one was injured and one was sick. So we were at 0 essentially, and that's not a good place to be. We did have other staff filling in. We had supervisors stepping up, but we need to add the 2 additional investigators. They will also help with the marijuana investigations. That's why we're requesting they be general fund, because we don't know what this season and the next season are going to hold for us. I can tell you, since the due date, we're seeing a significant uptick in complaints about people continuing to grow. We want to be responsive to that. The board has acted. People are expecting services, so we don't want to provide them with excuses. We want to be responsive to enforcing what's taken place.
Confirming, I'm sorry to interrupt, the 47,530, that is per position.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make
Starting
sure that was
January
clear.
1st, 2019. That's why it's low.
And that's at 50%, so next year that
It would be double,
double.
absolutely.
And does that include benefits, or is that,
Yes, that is loaded.
that's benefit? Okay.
Yes. The next is not actual additional employees. That's divers, rescue divers, drowning recovery, and evidence recovery divers. A lot of the people that have left our agency just so happen to be divers. We've also had some promotions and some people who no longer are comfortable getting in the water. There's a certain amount of training that goes along with diving, so that is an anticipated training cost, part of what Mr. Lutz was speaking about earlier. So we need to expand, I shouldn't say expand, we need to replace the divers that are leaving. And as you all know, we don't dive by ourselves. There's usually multiple people on the boat, and there's a certain time frame with which we stay in the water, and there's people assigned to safety and what have you, so I won't get into the details. Yes. You're on, Maria. As soon as there you go. You're good. You're good.
I just wanted to clarify that the estimated cost there, the $1,800 per diver, is based on the estimated cost on the average salary. The way that the diving costs work is that it's a percentage of the base salary. It's called special pay for the divers. So it's a percentage. It's usually 2.5%. It's a special pay provision. And it runs on average about $1,800 per annum per diver.
Captain, are they self-certified diving?
No, we send them.
You send them to
Yeah,
school for
we'd
training?
like them to have some experience, obviously. We don't want to send somebody to an expensive school that's never been a diver. I mean, on occasion, we get some that are already previously trained, but, we don't want somebody to find out that they can't dive or can't decompress or have issues while they're at school.
Now, is that a rescue diver certification?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's up and above the normal certification?
Yes, it is. And it's dangerous
So
work.
that's an added cost also?
It is. Cannabis enforcement, these are 2 Deputy 2 Step C positions funded at half the year. I mentioned being responsive again. They will work in tandem with the current marijuana enforcement team. This is something that we believe we needed to do this particular year. to again be responsive. This is a group of positions we would have to take year by year to see what happens. At this time, I'm not prepared to talk about trends as it relates to what's happening in the county, but I can talk in just some generality. If the marijuana grows do tend to go indoors, those investigations are going to get more intensive on the front end. The actual intelligence gathering and securing of the search warrant becomes more difficult, more time consuming a little bit. So we would need those investigators. Now on the outdoor end, there's a little more labor involved in work, and we've spoken about how we have some contractors to help out, but they're not the the end-all be-all. But I do have a little bit of a concern about some of the grows being driven indoors, and there being a lot more time-consuming process on the front end as it goes to surveillance, securing search warrants, writing reports, getting enough probable cause to get in and conduct the investigation on the front end.
And why are we waiting to fill these positions at mid-year?
Because we have to hire them, Mr. Mills. We have to hire them. We have to hire backfill. We can't just pluck people out of patrol. I talked about minimum standard, so we're not going to hire a brand new person. They're not capable of being a detective. So part of this was the negotiations and discussions with the county about budgeting for the year, but also we need to be realistic in the fact that we may not be able to get them hired based upon our hiring process until mid-year.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide.
Captain, one quick,
Yes.
before we go to dispatchers. How many people do we have on light duty?
I would have to consult with HR. We just got one back this last week. We just got notice. Sheriff, do you know?
I think right now we have 2 on light duty.
Just in
And
patrol.
For the benefit of the folks, can you explain what light duty assignments are?
Sure. Those are people who are either, well, actually, let me back up. Are you asking light duty? Because we have people that are off and out of work. And then we
I'm
have people
asking
light duty that actually come back to
assigned
work.
to work. What duties do they,
I don't think
what
we have
duties can they perform
Yeah, I
and
don't-
what duties are they prohibited from performing?
Well, it depends on which one you're talking about. We have one that was injured in an accident out at the fairgrounds. She can't do anything. So she's not even on light duty. She's just off.
She's on
work.
4850 time, which is
She's
the
basic-
disability time.
Right, and
Okay.
we have another one who also got injured on duty, and he's also 4850 time. And for the folks that don't know what that is, it's basically they're at home collecting a paycheck. They can't do anything. Once they get to a certain point, we can bring them back to light duty. I think we have correctional officers. I think I still have 4 people out on the corrections side that are on light duty, and they are, 2 of them are out completely. 2 of them are actually working in the booth doing some computer work and taking some phone calls and whatnot.
So no risk of conflict, and they're limited to the physical job that they're able to perform
Well, they're
on a
limited to what-
temporary basis.
They're limited to what the doctor recommends that they can do.
Absolutely.
So if they can't do their physical job, that's why they're on light duty.
And when that light duty period extends out, what happens? Do they get retired?
Well, that depends on them. We have to make accommodations for them. We've had numerous accommodation hearings to try and put them into another department or another area within our department and/or within the county. So that scenario goes on for quite a while.
And that's not very successful, is it?
Which part of it?
Reassigning a light duty?
Reassigning them? No, it's not.
Okay, but you still carry them on the books as a position?
Yeah, they're taking a hold. They're covering a position that we cannot backfill.
Okay, that adds to your not being able to staff your patrol units.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just want to make sure we understood that.
We are running out of battery juice here, and apparently we don't have a plug. So can we go to the next slide? So the sheriff's requested 2 additional dispatchers. We currently have 1 dispatcher in the academy. We have another dispatcher that is going out for an unknown period of time as well. Dispatch has been staffed very thin as well. So that is a request that has come in from that, the management of that area. And also we have a request for 2 additional correctional officers. Those are funded, those are full year funding. Maria? Full year's worth of FTE for the full fiscal year. Okay. Questions about those 2 positions? questions?
We have one slide left.
Yes, we do, and it's one we won't want to miss. So this next slide was separated from the original vehicle request. This is for an armored vehicle. You'll hear it be referred to as a Bearcat. That is a brand. We don't have any obligation to purchase that particular brand. This is an expensive item. The sheriff discussed this at a public event and had overwhelming support for purchasing this rescue vehicle. It's an armored rescue vehicle that could be utilized in a variety of different operations. We currently have a very, very old and a not very dependable armored vehicle that we got from the United Nations several years ago. When we received it, it was baby blue and had a significant amount of rust. At the time we received this vehicle, the budget and the recession were in full swing and there were budget issues. We took it to a prison and we had prison inmates work on it, and they did a beautiful job of cosmetically improving it. However, the motor and the structural repairs of this vehicle, they are incredibly expensive. This is the sheriff can talk about the mechanics more so than I can, but this is a heavyweight vehicle and there's not a lot of parts readily available, and it is a very heavy vehicle that has to be towed whenever it breaks down. A few years ago, we were taking this vehicle to a high-risk search warrant involving some nasty gang members that were committing a lot of shootings in Stockton that were residing in our county, and the vehicle broke down on the way. And I will never forget that day, and I'm sure some other staff member and the folks that were counting on that vehicle will not forget it as well. This is a photo of a vehicle that's being used. You can see it's being used to rescue kids at a school. The sheriff talked about that in the public at a public event. And this type of vehicle is tested. It is reliable, but it is incredibly expensive. If you'll take a look at the bottom, what I did is I talked to our SWAT team and said, hey, what type of equipment do you need on this vehicle? Because this vehicle does not come fully equipped with the extras. So they worked with a vendor to get a rough estimate, and the estimated cost was $400,000. We are requesting $200,000 of general fund. The sheriff's AB 443 fund is going to contribute $150,000. And then the Friends of the Sheriff's Office have verbally committed $50,000 at this time. The Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office purchased this same vehicle a few years ago. They used Homeland Security grant funds to do that, as have some other agencies. Those funds went with the CAO's office when OES transitioned over. However, there could be some discussions about other funding sources, including Teeter. I don't want to step in that at this point. That's up for the board to look at. I just want to talk about this vehicle and some of the expensive equipment, because as a taxpayer myself, I look at how much some of this stuff costs and I say, that sounds unreasonable, or oh my God. And when it comes to the sheriff's office equipment, when you have a major emergency, when the stuff hits the fan and things are bad, you can't say, time out, I need to go get this. Time out, I need to go get that. We do a lot of things behind the scenes. We pre-deploy equipment when we think we might have a bad event. We do it quietly to not scare the hell out of the public. But it's part of our profession. It's part of being ready. It's part of being prepared. We don't have the funding to put these at every school in the county. That's the bottom line. But if the stuff does hit the fan, regardless of whether it's at a school or somewhere else, I don't want an undependable vehicle and to have to make the decision to put 10 or 12 guys in that vehicle and send them into what can be a very deadly situation and not have them properly equipped. We don't get to go back. We don't get to go back. Everybody else goes back. The media goes back. The lawyers go back. Everybody else goes back and says, why didn't you do this? Why weren't you prepared? So this is part of modern policing. This is part of modern law enforcement. A couple of years ago, this was some bad thing and everybody was turning them back, and I thought it was absurd. Why would you not want to have all the equipment you could possibly have to protect your citizenry when things go bad? I'm a big proponent of this vehicle. I had no idea how the public was going to respond to it, but based upon what I've heard from the meeting where it was announced, it was heavily supported, and I think that's a good thing. It is a tool, and it gets our staff close, And if it really does save one life, especially, some poor school child, then I think it's every bit worth of that $400,000, and I think the parents of the school kids would agree. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but I've been dealing with problems associated with not even having an armored vehicle and having to scratch and claw and get a used one that was beat to hell and beg somebody to patch it up, and now we're trying to do things right. So that's why we have this included. It is important to note, it takes a year to build this. We would like permission to purchase this thing and execute a purchase order this year, but it will not be part of this year's budget because it's a 300-day build out, and so it will actually be budgeted next year. But they're not going to say, Calaveras County, we're going to build this for you on your good word. We're going to need to execute some sort of purchase order. So we do want the board to take some action regarding this particular item. Did I explain that clear enough on the year-to-year issue, the build out? I'll take that as a yes. Okay.
Captain, you and I have had these conversations.
At least one, yes.
Yeah, I think that this needs to be a coordinated effort, whatever that funding is. If we're still able to get some type of funding through Homeland Security or other systems, because there's multiple ways to do it, as you know, it might take that coordinated approach to get it done. And I would expect that there would be some level of cooperation between the CAO's office and your office as to how that would work. But
Well, I was just saying, to be clear, the Homeland Security funds, the oversight piece comes with OES, but there's a very separate process for Homeland Security funds. It's a committee of 5, including the sheriff, your Angels police chief, fire, public health, that basically review. We get an allocation of funds. That committee of 5 makes the determination. So it really is not going into the OES budget, nor is it swept. It really comes, the process itself hasn't changed in terms of that same committee is going to be reviewing it.
no, I have some understanding of it only because of the contacts that I've made and curious questions that I've done. So I'd appreciate that there be some cooperation in how that works.
I know you had a concern about maintenance cost, and we did look into that. I will tell you there's a little bit of a difference between the number you were told and the number I was given. Not significant, but $1,500 difference.
Okay. Is it higher?
Lower.
Really?
The information we received was lower than the information you had in your conversation.
Oh, very
And
good.
what were those numbers?
I think
3,000.
3,000 is what he had found out.
Yearly?
A yearly maintenance, yes. And I think we had about 1,800, 1,500, 1,800.
So it's really not an expensive vehicle to maintain when you think about what it does for you. Has to be part of the consideration.
Yeah, I have a question a bit that you need this. We'll get down to brass tacks, I guess, tomorrow and go line by line through everything, but, anytime someone tells me it's going to take a year to deliver,
Yeah.
I'm sure this is going to come as a surprise, but you're using AB 443. Perhaps we could figure out a way to loan you the general fund money so you could buy the whole thing, and then we take the second half out of next year's, pay for it over 2 years instead of 1 year, and we could work together. Just an idea of when we get there. We need it, we get that. I assume we get that, but we have to figure out a way to pay for it.
And I fully agree. I think that there's options within loaning, within funds. It's just a way to work around it, but it might be something we could spread over a number of years if we did it as a loan, rather than trying to do it as a one-time hit to a single year's budget.
Figured out.
One stat I neglected, in the last year, we've utilized the armored vehicle 7 times, and that's because we knew it was running and healthy. We would have utilized it a few more times on a few more events. The other thing, the vehicle we have now is much larger than this one, and we have to choose very carefully what roads we take this up. When there's trees there, we don't want to get the thing stuck. Not talking about in the mud, but in between 2 trees. So this does have a lot more flexibility. It's a lot faster. It's a lot more efficient than what we're currently using. But to provide some stats, we utilized in the last year 7 high-risk search warrants.
So
In the perfect world, you wouldn't have to use it at all.
Agreed.
how many men can it transport with all the equipment that they have?
Depends on the size of the one we get, 10 or 12, but that's just inside. You'll see there's rails on the side and handrails. So depending on the event and what we're doing and the tactical approach will depend. It will actually double that if you utilize the rails. And then we have somebody who's assigned to just maintain that vehicle. They're a driver only. They're not an actual official SWAT operator. And they treat those like their child as best they can, and that's their sole job.
So is there a wall between the back and the driver's area?
No,
No, there's
no.
not. So
That is a
quite-
solid
quite
armored vehicle that's capable of taking a large round.
Thank you.
Just to give you a little mechanical background on the vehicle that we have. The vehicle weighs a little over 13,000 pounds. It's a two-wheel drive vehicle. It has a 4-cylinder Toyota diesel engine in it. And when you go up Brisky Hill, you're lucky if you go 25 miles an hour. And when you go down, you better only be going 25 miles an hour because you don't know if it's going to stop at the bottom. This vehicle here is a Ford chassis. It's a Ford F550 chassis, and it comes with a 7.3 turbo diesel engine in it. So it will get around a whole lot better, and it doesn't weigh near with that Mamba that we have. That Mamba came from Africa, and that's where they used it out on the flat grounds. So two different completely types of vehicles. This vehicle has access through the back door, both side doors, whereas the Mamba has access only through the back door, so it takes a lot longer to get out. There are no side rails on it. This here again has side rails, so this is more conducive for the type of events that we're going to be dealing with.
And that 13,000 is empty. That's not with the 12 guys and the equipment.
That's empty, yes.
all
Yeah.
piled in there, plus
Yeah,
the driver.
and that doesn't count the 100 gallons of fuel that goes in it, that it might take you to get somewhere and back.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I don't have any further questions. Supervisor Olivera, your light's on?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you used your vehicle 7 times last year. All you need to do is use it once, and it pays for itself. I'm carrying
Absolutely.
4 open police officers because we didn't have one.
And again, like the
On the
captain
website.
said, that was just 7 times that we utilized it. There are numerous other times we could have used it, but the time frame that it would take to get somewhere, the fact that it maybe not have been running, there's a whole lot of other issues going on. We would
Sold
have
me.
utilized it a lot more.
Don't need to oversell it.
Yeah,
I support it.
I appreciate it.
Well, the question would be then with the jail, you were at 31% open positions as of the June of this year?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You had 31 open positions as of June of this year in your jail
31?
staff? 31%.
Oh, 31%, I was gonna say. That's half my place.
Is it easier to recruit for the jail than it is for the patrol staff?
Well, but obviously, as you well know, patrol staff takes a different type of person. It takes someone who's a police officer. We can take a kid right out of high school who's 18 years old from Calaveras High or Bret Hart High and bring them into the jail to employ them as a correctional officer. They go through a 6-week academy as opposed to a 6-month academy. And the benefit is now if we have someone who comes in at 18, he works with us for 3 years, he turns 21, and we have the ability to send him to the police academy, and that keeps them invested in the county, and he has a little bit of institutional knowledge on who he's going to be dealing with. And that was the program that Ms. Hawkins and I, through HR, started back up to take people from within the department and move them over to the patrol side.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I do have a couple questions about, one is on marine.
Marine
You're
safety?
Yeah, marine safety. You're asking for $547,971 this year, appropriations, that's your request. Last year, final budget, we only had $305,940.
Can answer that.
And to date, you've only used 287 of that, so I'm questioning why we're doubling, well, we're not doubling, but we're asking for $210,000 more.
That includes the boat that's the overall budget. I can't tell what page you're referencing, but I'm assuming you're referencing the overall budget for marine
Correct, the
safety.
overall budget.
And that includes the
That was
boat.
the boats that you had up there.
We are getting a new boat for marine safety. And that also, Maria, includes the vehicle, I believe. And then we are putting new yeah. What does that include? It would help if you could reference what page you're.
What you had here,
What page you on?
I'm on page 501.
Thank you.
Page 501.
So the budget for marine safety includes a sergeant and 1 deputy, and at this time, that position is being vacated. The officer's leaving our employment. But in addition to that, we are asking for the largest changes in the department is for the dive team equipment. That's the most significant change that's occurring that would escalate the costs over the prior year. And that is the equipment that's needed for the 5 dive team members that we talked about earlier on in the presentation. And that's about $10,000. In addition to that, what I hadn't been doing, and I insist on doing it this year, is I am dedicating the fuels for all the respective budget units to the appropriate budget unit. It was that the patrol unit was picking up the costs for the alternate units. I do not feel that satisfactory, so I'm now allocating or requesting the allocations of the fuel, gasoline for the vehicle and gasoline for the boat, be appropriated in marine safety. So that increased the cost from fuel, which used to be just for the boat, at $1,000 up to $11,000. So that's an increase that I could discuss with you on that. And then further, as the captain was saying, a significant increase that goes to the bottom line is for the boat. But the boat is being fully reimbursed by the state, so it's actually revenue neutral, revenue expense neutral. And then one final thing I'd like to add is that historically the overtime, to the appropriate page, I must have fumble fingers today. Historically, the overtime hours that had been deployed was this year about 671. The year prior, a little over 350. This year, we're asking for 1,160 hours because basically each year we're having to come mid-year and make an adjustment for overtime. So rather than reapproach it mid-year and have to readjust things, we're just coming up front and being straightforward about the need. And that need of increasing the overtime hours to a little over 1,100 hours at the new increased rates that our deputies obtained from their salaries brought the overtime costs up from what was $30,000 to $80,000.
So that was the budget employee cost increases associated with the MOU, the contract and the MOU.
And then I'm going to go jump to the jail. I'm at 503. And line item 5271, professional services and specialized services.
271, sir?
5271.
Yeah, 271 is a line item that's actually a shared line item. There's a matching line item in, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. 271 is actually the CFMG contract. That is the nursing contract for the jail. And what inflated that recently is we now have coverage in the evenings and the weekends. And the board was gracious enough to take care of that for us. I think it was just this past year. Escalated costs for this coming year brings that cost
All
up.
right, well, that answers that question.
And I am showing $25,000 for the marketing contract.
Yes, sir. And then that was going to be my very next
brought up.
point.
Is part of that 641?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Department marketing.
Say, let's.
The marketing program.
Yes,
for
we're splitting it between the jail and patrol.
Okay, so it's shared.
So you're
25
recruiting, he's marketing for.
Yes, because there's attribution for the marketing in both sides of the house.
All right, support that, thank you.
I do
You're
have one
welcome.
question.
You're very welcome.
I do have a question. Are the 2 drones working okay?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
So that worked out.
yes.
Sir.
Captain, one quick question. Let's go back to marine safety. How many boats do we have now?
We have 3 boats that are in operation. We're in the process of returning an older boat. We have 2 patrol boats and a dive boat. And we're obviously in the process of getting another boat, which will replace one of the current boats. The state provides those boats to us through, it's changed departments. It's now Division of California State Parks, Division of Boating and Waterways. So they provide those with those funds. We compete for those funds with other agencies, but we've had a long-standing, pretty good relationship with them. And throughout the year, I've come to the board with little bits of money here and there where they've had extra money and they've offered it for us to purchase equipment or other things. So they've been a pretty decent partner with us. And they provide the boats, but they don't provide the vehicles. And unfortunately, our vehicle is old. That's why this year we're utilizing the AB 443 funds to purchase a replacement vehicle.
So basically, the state buys the boat.
Correct.
That's through the Marine Safety Program.
Correct.
And we have 3 boats. We're going to get another boat. We're going to replace one. So that leaves,
We're getting rid of one. Yes, we have 3 boats, 2 patrol boats and a dive boat, and they're
Correct.
different. The 2 patrol boats are similar. The dive boat is different. We're in the process of applied for the state and received, I believe, notice we're getting another boat, whether it was formal or verbal at this point, I'm not sure. So once that one comes in, we will either maintain an extra boat or get rid of an older one, depending on maintenance and what's going on.
so what happens to those funds when we get rid of an older boat?
The state takes that back. We don't.
State
we do
takes
not
it back.
receive. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't make any money on that, do we?
No. No, but I will tell you, they provide a service for us by providing us with those boats.
Correct.
And I can tell you, drowning, without getting into too much details, when you have a drowning, you have people on shore, you want the best resources in the world you have, and you have a family watching you from 20 feet offshore, and you're trying to recover a loved one. Again, it goes back to having the equipment ahead of time as opposed to not having it.
And we have one sergeant assigned to Marine Safety,
Correct.
and we had a deputy assigned to it also?
Correct, and we're doing a bit of a reorganization this year as well. And we're going to merge it with our lake contracts and cross-train some people so that we have a lot more flexibility in the event we have an emergency event. We have people trained, and it'll also help us because part of our departmental management problem with staff leaving is having staff trained. With such new staff coming in, we're behind the curve, so we need to get back ahead of that. So we're going to kind of cross-train some folks so that when somebody goes out sick or injured or school or court, we can move them out of Marine Safety, have them work a lake contract, and we still recover the fund for revenue.
We talked about $11,000 in overtime.
Yes.
Where do we incur overtime on that?
It depends. Like I said, if we have a drowning, those get expensive depending on how long it takes us to locate the person. If we utilize, we have complaints, a significant amount of complaints at certain lakes relating to noise and wild boating. We have DUIs. We actually do the BUIs. We do accident investigations. Those sometimes occur after hours, and we have to call people out. We've already done Memorial Day weekend. We did a large enforcement thing to kind of set the message for the year. We put all of our boats out and had some good statistics and success come out of that. And we try to do a lot of preventative measures, specifically on the shoreline with young kids, getting them into life jackets, walking the shoreline, talking to parents. We actually kind of have a bad drowning problem at a particular lake, and it happens between 2 dates, so we really saturate that lake ahead of time to try and do some preventative stuff to prevent that.
It's a pretty good program, good marketing program, isn't it?
I never got to work boats, at least as a full-time job. I've been out, but it was never an assignment. And believe it or not, some people love it, and some people don't want anything to do with it, so. That'd be tough, I don't know.
That was in the Speedo.
Yeah,
And a water skiing video.
yeah, right, yeah, I wish.
Captain, one last question. There was a time when we utilized extra hired deputies on Marine Patrol.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're not able to do that anymore.
We still could, so we've had 2 iterations of that. At one point in time, we had extra hires, and it was a set amount, said you can work boating safety, but this is all you're gonna get paid. But the sheriff's talked heavily about overtime issues, and so we just don't have a lot of deputies wanting to work overtime. They're tired from all the required overtime. So we have actually supplemented our staff with sheriff's volunteers, just to ride around in the boat, to be an extra set of eyes to help when pulling up next to another boat. But no, we don't have a group that's interested or willing to go out and work boating safety. So we're supplemented it. We work with Tuolumne County and Amador County very closely. But believe it or not, right now we don't have, there's not a lot of people signing up for overtime right now because a lot of it's already being required of them elsewhere.
Thank you, Captain.
Yeah, just a point of note, I noticed that you're going to be pretty static in your reserve funds from this year to next year, about $3 million give or take a little bit?
Yes, sir.
And that is even with all of the adjustments that we've talked about to this point?
Which reserve funds are you speaking?
I'm just going down the list of all of them that are on the report.
You're talking about our designated funds?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So this is on page 51. But I added it all up as to what you had. What you intended to have as of June of 2018 is $3,047,000, and June of 2019, $2,994,000. So
It would be much easier for me if you went through each specific fund and I can address those as opposed to overall, so we can make sure we're
well,
comparing.
all I'm trying to do is be sure that whatever we're allocating or you're planning on allocating out of it, like AB 443, that
Sure,
you're going to
yeah.
maintain a pretty static level here.
Which is our goal, and I will tell you that the difficult thing about looking at our designated funds is it often leads one to believe, wow, the sheriff's office has all this money.
No,
It does
I'm not
not
there.
show what it's committed to for the next fiscal year. It does
No.
not show what's committed to beyond that. And there are times we specifically save designated funds for years, knowing we have a big expenditure coming up. And the AB 443 is one of them. I mentioned the Cal ID when we have to purchase the fingerprinting machines. Those are expensive. So that's all part of Sheriff's Office management and administration.
No, I'm not speaking to it in any way of challenging what you have. I'm simply wanting to be sure that you're maintaining a static number here, even through all of the other discussion we're having regarding your expenditures. We know this isn't one-time money because there is money coming in at the end during the year to backfill it. But I just want to be sure that we're not impacting it in a negative way with whatever decisions we're making.
Sure. We are hitting AB 443 harder this year than we ever have in the past,
Right.
with the exception of the recession year.
Yeah, because they do list what your income levels are for the year and expenditures, so, thank you.
Yes, that's correct.
Can I just take a quick moment to apologize to Mr. Lutz? I was a little short with him on the law enforcement comment with the grass, Mr. Lutz. Unfortunately, I've had somebody do that to me in public before, and it was not you, and so I want to apologize. You've been a professional and worked with us, and I apologize for being short with you. I just
No offense taken.
I reacted to that, and I was a little shorter than I would like to have been.
You missed this morning, so you were kind to us.
Okay.
All right, we're back from break. And I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to proceed going forward from here. We're going to have Barbara from the district attorney, or the district attorney, give her presentation. Public Works, I'm being told, does not have a presentation. Is that correct? So then we're going to move on to Leslie Davis, and we'll try and finish today. Then we will come back tomorrow here at 9 a.m. and reopen the hearing at that time. And we'll have any board questions that may have come up and need to be answered. And then I will open it up to public comment at that time. And then we will close public comment and the board will go into deliberations at that time. So just so we clarify, we're going to get to public comments on this whole agenda and the whole budget hearing sometime tomorrow in the AM. Okay, so Barbara. Yes, we will come back here at 9. The board will have questions, but we won't go into deliberations until after public comments. Then I'll close public comments, and then we'll go into deliberations. Okay? All right.
Good
Barbara, you're-
afternoon or early evening. Barbara Uke, District Attorney. My presentation today is without PowerPoint. I didn't have any particular plans to go over the whole budget or for my victim services grants. My purpose is to specifically let you know that on page 232 of your budget book, I assume you have the same page numbers. This is the second textual page of the budget memo where it has the CAO's recommendation. The recommendation states that the CAO is recommending my budget request, and the big piece of that is the cannabis deputy district attorney. This is the brand new position I'm requesting to be embedded with the sheriff's office with their marijuana enforcement unit. Those of you who've been around for a little while may recall that in its former versions, I've come before you asking for a 4-person unit. That would be a prosecutor, an investigator, a forensic accountant, and a support person. Through discussions with the CAO's office and the auditor and HR, I scaled that back to what position I thought was the most important position, given the sheriff's office efforts at building their investigation staff for cannabis, and that would be a prosecutor. And it has to be a high-level prosecutor because of the job that they would be doing embedded with the sheriff's office. It's a mixed civil and criminal caseload. It would be somebody who could do the high-level investigation support and also prosecutions for environmental crimes, for the financial crimes, asset forfeiture, for all of the big laundry list that I've spouted at you many, many, many times, and I don't want to regurgitate right now. And with that also, a specific dedicated budget for forensic accounting services. Through discussions with HR and admin and the auditor, we decided that that might be the better way to go, especially as this is starting out with your support, if you were going to support it this time. So we can see how that goes, especially because the anticipated difficulty we would have with building the position and attracting the position, it would have to be a very highly paid position. So in order to kind of just get started with the unit, I scaled it back. I agreed to scale it back to just the prosecutor out of my office with that dedicated budget, again, to be embedded with the sheriff's office. Now, the recommendation, as it's stated, is that that position is being recommended by the CAO. However, in further discussions with the CAO, he is not actually recommending that position, and it is not in the recommended budget with the Schedule 9. So when you're looking at it and wondering why I'm standing in front of you, because it sounds like I'm getting everything I want, that is not the case. That position was taken out. It's not being recommended in my budget or the position control list.
If I could also clarify where the confusion came in, and this took a couple days of us trying to reconcile. So what's not reflected in the department's narrative as clearly is a request to reclassify a, what was the position?
It's an administrative assistant 2 who is retiring at the end of June. She's been with us for 28 years, and given she didn't want any fanfare, so hopefully she'll forgive me for mentioning it, but because of the longevities and the salary, it's actually a wash to bring in a deputy DA1. So that's a switch, and the forms are in there as the attachments. That's where the instructions.
Yeah,
for
I think the
OG
forms
came
are in there. It just wasn't on the major changes piece, because as your point being, if it wasn't
Budget
necessarily changing your expenditures at this point. So the intent was add the investigative assistant, add the new district attorney, but in terms of the actual cannabis unit, not adding the actual high-level attorney and contracting for the forensic accountant. Now, what's unclear is whether that new district attorney, since you are still gaining an additional attorney that you didn't have, whether they could support anything on the cannabis side or not.
No.
Or if instead reclassify that position to this higher-level attorney, but not add the low-level second attorney, basically adding just one attorney in the office instead of 2 new attorneys.
And, you know, I don't mean to imply at all that the administrative assistant has been practicing law without a license, but she's been around for so long. There are a lot of compliance issues. She's actually a certified paralegal. She's capable of doing the research within paralegal scope, and she's very highly skilled. And at this point, I would love to be able to replace her at somebody with her skill level. However, I don't think that's very likely, and given that it's budget neutral, I get more flexibility out of an entry-level DDA. That's why that decision was made. For the cannabis unit, it does have to be a very high-level attorney.
I'm a little confused. What exactly are we asking?
I'm asking for you to fund the deputy DA for the specific assignment to be embedded with the sheriff's office marijuana unit. And that is not reflected in my budget at this point.
So they would work on none of the other crimes?
All the cannabis, the mixed civil and criminal caseload that we would like to start.
They won't be working on assaults, rapes, theft?
If they're cannabis related, yes.
Why can't we, they're not capable of being a utility player? I mean, look, federal law is changing, state law is changing, misdemeanors, granted there's associated crime, and I understand all that. But I'm just thinking, we get a good hire, we want a hire that you can use for a lot of years, I'm assuming.
Okay, turn your microphone on.
I'm sorry, Susan. So, I don't know, I'm not intimately familiar with your business, so help me understand and be easy.
Well, to start off, I would want the attorney embedded with the sheriff's office, actually housed there, because I don't really have room in my trailer, and the current sheriff has agreed to do that. The advantage of having an attorney embedded with a unit is that they are seeing the cases from inception. They are preparing from the inception, guiding the investigation, if you will, for what's going to end up in a successful prosecution, pulling all the pieces together. Instead of just maybe a marijuana misdemeanor, we're looking at organized crime potential aspects. We're looking at the environmental crimes. We're looking at unfair business practices prosecutions, perhaps a civil prosecution instead of a criminal prosecution. They could be perhaps supporting county council's efforts with some of the broader range cases that they would like to pursue instead of just the administrative ones. So there's a lot of legwork that has to happen when you're building a case. For instance, the sheriff's office just talked about some of the search warrant reviews and things like that. Right now, my deputies, we try to drop everything if the deputies come in and they're sitting on a house and there has to be a search warrant done. We try to do what we can to drop everything to jump in and review that search warrant. It's very, very time consuming. We frequently review them after hours, in the evenings, on the weekends. For large operations, if you remember Operation Terminus, the only attorney I had to do it, it was me, and I was here at the office until midnight for about 2 weeks straight reviewing all those search warrants to make sure that they would pass muster. It's especially more complicated because of all the changes in the law and because of all the different layers that we were working with. So, these types of prosecutions are best done and more powerful if they are done in a vertical model instead of just spread out among a regular caseload. And so my vision in working partnership with the sheriff's office is to have somebody dedicated to the unit, to those officers, to all their cases, and so we don't end up in a silo with just the misdemeanor. We're looking at the broad attack to enforce the laws or enforce whatever law is going to be in place in our county going forward, and whether or not things switch and we end up with a market that we need to support to keep out the bad guys. However it's going to look, we need to build this model. And, I've been here since, I don't even want to say what year, asking to get this started, and we haven't gotten it started. So at this point, I have agreed to scale back and just ask for just the attorney and really partner with the sheriff's office and their additional investigatory resources with that budget line for specific financial investigations so we can get it started. And I do anticipate it would be a full-time job just for that caseload because it is very broad. Going down the road, maybe things change and everything's working perfectly and we just don't have the cases, and then that would be a different discussion. I want to remind you that we are using the resources of the California District Attorneys Association, the circuit prosecutor, the environmental circuit prosecutor resources for free. And they've taken a number of our cases, and we do have to share him with 8 other counties though. So it's a limited resource, and he's only able to do, because of the funding, his funding stream, crimes that are environmentally related. So he's got to carve out that piece. So instead of attacking it as, okay, we're going to go for this other criminal piece and the environmental piece, and we're going to go after you for tax evasion or unfair business practices or all the other slew of things that we could be doing, we're just looking at one slice. I would like to be able to bring that all together, and it takes a dedicated resource. It takes the ability to have the vertical prosecutor.
So you're only looking for one deputy DA, and the second one was for the forensic contract for that?
Right. It was $25,000 put into the line item to see.
We are looking to, you have an assistant eliminate the assistant position and reclassify that as a deputy, and then add an attorney? Is that correct?
Yeah, the request was reclassify an assistant to a deputy,
To a deputy.
add another deputy at a high level, and then add the investigator assistant or...
Investigative assistant, that's the non-sworn investigator. That's Captain Macedo was complaining about the employee I stole a while ago. That is the investigative assistant, non-sworn investigator. We do have a sworn investigator position that's open. It's been open because, and we haven't been able to recruit successfully for it. My one sworn peace officer has been trying to retire, and he will retire at some point very soon. And we have to have a sworn investigator. So my long-term goal, and I set this out in my budget memo, is to work with HR to build a career ladder. If I can find the right people, bring them in as non-sworn investigators, and following the sheriff's model with academy positions, put them through the academy so they can become a sworn peace officer, DAI. So if I can't attract one, I want to grow one.
So my question to the CAO is, looking at salary and wages on line 5001, she requested 1458583. You are recommending 1576493. Does that include all of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I should explain how the system is designed. If you look at...
235, I'm sorry.
If you look at basically all of the salary lines under salaries and benefits, you'll see a line toward the very bottom that says add delete, and you see a larger number there. Basically what we asked departments to do is put everything that they wanted to add or delete on that line. That way it was easy for us to go in, and if we were denying that position, we could pull it out easily without having to redo all the lines. The ones that we were moving forward with approval then moved from that add delete line up to those other lines. So that's why you could be seeing those increases in the salaries, because it was a placeholder until they were, we got to the point that we were ready to move it there.
And before the meeting,
I do.
before the meeting resumed, I did have a conversation with CAO Lutz about the numbers, because what's reflected in your budget book on page 236, Schedule 9, the column 5, this is the department requested budget. With respect to the salaries and benefits, that does not match what I put into OpenGov, and
I already
we're
sent
not
you an email on it. I do remember it once I saw it.
Okay.
This was a key punching error from someone who input in your budget. They were supposed to do 15,000 and they put 150,000. Which slight key punching error.
It's one number.
That,
yeah.
Count the zeros.
So we did correct the key punching error is why it changed.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
DA, thank you for coming. Tell me what agency has their own private district attorney?
District attorney or district attorney investigator? Because every county has.
You're asking for an embedded district attorney, assistant district attorney, to go with a law enforcement agency. Can you tell me any agency that has that right now?
You know what, off the top of my head, I cannot, but it's a very common practice to have, for vertical units, have a DDA, deputy DA assigned to an investigation unit.
I would love to hear that agency.
Okay.
Could you get that information
Sure.
for me?
I will. And my office was part of a larger meeting with some task forces recently, and that's the feedback I got as well, that some of these other agencies have, specifically for cannabis, deputy DA embedded with their unit. They're specifically assigned to this unit. It's very common. It's done with domestic violence. It's done with other narcotics. It's a very common practice.
Yeah, but they're
when
actually
you have the
embedded-
resources
They're actually embedded with the law enforcement
housed
agency.
together.
Yeah, in the
Yes.
same building.
Yes.
I would love to hear those agencies.
Find out.
I'm an old guy. I've been out of the business a little bit. Number two,
Or
how
it's
many...
vice versa. They have the cops assigned with the DA, so they were in the same office.
Oh, I've heard
physically.
that.
Okay.
I've heard that, but
Oh, okay.
not your own district attorney. We're going to set a precedence here.
Well, we actually did
How
that
many
a few
criminal
years ago at the
investigations
Harvard
have
building.
you done regarding the marijuana program?
I don't have the numbers with me. I really wasn't sure what I was going to be presenting today until I just had these discussions with Mr. Lutz.
Maybe you can get that information for us.
Arnie, are you talking about just every single type of case, or are you just talking about
Anything,
a cultivation
anything
case?
along the lines that you've just described, the use of the assistant district attorney embedded with the law enforcement agency, the sheriff's department, and a part-time investigator, and a non-sworn investigator. Can you describe that job description
Okay.
for me?
First, we do not have a deputy DA specifically assigned to the cannabis team. We do not, and we have not, and that's what I'm asking for.
I understand.
So I can't, we don't have any vertical cases. They're all spread out.
I understand.
So the non-sworn investigator can do everything a DAI can do, just can't arrest and can't draft the search warrants.
You can't make
issue the search
arrests, and you
warrants.
can't
Can do
file for
everything
affidavits on search warrants.
Unless it requires the
Has
gun
to
and
be a
badge.
sworn police officer
Right.
or a sworn law enforcement. Yeah, I have trouble trying to determine what the role of the non-sworn investigator is. How
It's
does
very-
the sheriff feel about this scenario you're describing for us?
Which scenario, having the non-sworn
The
investigator
the
or
embedded
having?
assistant district attorney in his office
He's in support.
and involving in his investigations.
He's in support.
He's for it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'll have a conversation with him on that. You mentioned Terminus. How many agencies were involved in that investigation?
I'd have to go back to my office and
Were there
figure out the
state
numbers.
agencies or
Yes.
federal agencies?
Yes.
Wouldn't they handle their investigations with their own attorney staff?
Their own investigations as far as what they could do.
What their investigations resulted in the Terminus
They're,
program?
okay, so if it's a crime that occurs in our county,
I understand.
it's my job to prosecute it. So there can be agreements, we can say, hey, you can get a better penalty, hey, we're happy with what you can do, we'll defer jurisdiction and you can have it. But if it's another agency and they're coming to play in our county,
You would have
the crime
concurrent
stays here.
jurisdiction.
Yes,
Right.
we have jurisdiction.
concurrent jurisdiction.
So we had
So-
partner agencies coming in and assisting with the investigation. Well, those cases fall on my desk and I have to
But
farm
if
them
it's
out to
their
my deputies.
case-
I'm sorry?
If it's their initiation on the case, if it's a state or federal agency, they take the lead on that investigation.
And they
correct?
refer to us.
Even though it occurs in our county.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's some cooperation with your office. I think what you're proposing here could be a little bit over the wall. But let's find out and make sure we have
Okay.
our information correct, okay?
Well, what I just want to say to you is that an agency is an investigating agency, and if it's going to be a criminal prosecution, they come to my office. All of that would come to my office. All of the Terminus
So
players,
FBI would come to your office.
they came to my office, yes,
Yeah,
unless they were going to take
But they
it
wouldn't use
somewhere
their
else.
prosecution on a federal level.
It would be a jurisdictional question. So, but if it's a state crime and if it's our county ordinance crime, they're coming to us.
Well,
So,
let's see if we can get that information. That'll help me look at this thing a little bit clearer.
well, and to answer a piece of it, there are a couple of the agencies that helped out with Terminus that did take their cases administratively after coordinating with my office. So I'm not sure where you think they're taking their cases otherwise.
Tell you what, I'll rely on your information. You bring it
Okay.
back to us, okay?
Okay?
Thank you.
Supervisor Mills?
We're at 1,000 questions going here.
Well, maybe
So
she
you
gets Sheriff
mentioned-
back down here and he can vouch for what I'm saying.
You mentioned that you had an open position. That position was open pretty much all year, last fiscal
For
year?
the DA investigator,
Yeah.
yes, unfortunately.
So that turned into a salary savings
It did.
for you.
It did.
And I noticed in the requested for the department under 5801 on page 235, it talks about 212,000 in salary savings. It's an awful big number.
And that's not my number. I don't know if that was the
That was our clerical error.
one number that was
It
off.
should have been
Oh.
15,000 and ended up being 150,000.
So
So-
that's where the confusion.
So our entry, or intended entry into the OpenGov was 77,000. And since we don't have anyone in the pipeline to fill the DAI, I think I budgeted at least another quarter for that, and that's probably optimistic. If I found somebody tomorrow, they would still have to go through a background, and the background even quickly will be 3 months. So I did budget another, at least, I believe, 1/4 of salary savings for the open investigator position, just out of reality.
Is it
And I
something
could go
that
longer
might
than that.
You might want to just pull off the docket and
I
explore it
can't.
mid-year?
I can't, because we can't recruit unless we have the open position.
I got it.
So, it's just one of those things, I have to replace, my investigator, I have to have a sworn peace officer. If we don't, we lose our CLETs, we lose all kinds of things that go with it. Plus, he's our office security, he's my one armed peace officer.
And if you lose one to retirement, that's going to really take you a hit for you.
Yes,
Yes.
it'll be a salary savings, but, so,
Okay,
look at
okay.
the right side, but,
And I
yes.
want to tell you this, I still carry this proudly.
They're doing an update. They're
You're doing
working on
an
an
update?
update after Prop 64, yes.
Getting
I'll
there.
let you know, okay.
Thank
I
you.
will. I will.
Any other questions? Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Again, Public Works is not going to give us a presentation, so we'll move on to Leslie Davis, the assessor. Good evening, Leslie.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I guess I'm the wrap-up, so I get to follow all those wonderful presentations. I'll start by thanking the CAO for looking so favorably upon my budget request. I will admit to you that I went for the brass ring. Everything I put in this budget request I want, so that which was not approved this year is just going to keep coming back. One of the reasons for that is the comments that Captain Macedo and the sheriff made earlier this evening, and that has to do with salary adjustments, recruitment, and retention. The sheriff's office is not the only office in Calaveras County government that experiences that problem. Just this week, I received a recruitment for a junior appraiser in another county that starts at $29.96 an hour. And I just want to give you a comparison. My chief appraiser, who would oversee the work of a junior appraiser and train them and help them move up the ranks, starts at $32.06 an hour, just 10% more. That should give you an idea of how very far behind our salary schedule is with the counties that we compete with. I understand the dilemma that you have. I understand that your finances are tight and you have to figure out how you might dispense that money. But I have to tell you that my staff, and certainly the staff at the county, deserve a raise. They work very hard for you every day. I know my staff works very hard for me every day, and I'm really not going to let that one go, even though I understand the arguments on the part of admin, because I've certainly had the conversation with Judy Hawkins. Instead, though, I just want to talk to you a little bit about my staffing requests and how I'm hoping to help fund those requests. So I've asked for 3 positions, 2 advanced appraisers, appraiser 3s, who are capable of complex income-producing property appraisals, because we do not have that skill set in the office, except, as Barbara noted in her office, me. And department heads in Calaveras County, as you well know, are working department heads. There are many, many tasks we do every day. So sitting down and going and doing the actual hands-on work becomes extremely difficult. Because of the compaction in the salary schedule that Calaveras County has, there's really no incentive for my appraisers to want to get a 5% raise and do that much harder work. So again, that salary adjustment discussion is going to keep coming back. The other position that I want to hire is an assessment analyst, and I say it that way because I really do believe my assessment technician should be reclassified to assessment analyst. And I really do believe it's time to acknowledge the very technical and difficult work that they do. But again, admin chose not to approve that request, and I'm just telling you it's going to keep coming back. What I'm hoping to use to help fund these requests, in other words, the 2 positions and hopefully a 3rd limited term position, is funding that the governor has included in his 2018-19 budget. He has included, I can't even remember the name of it, it's something like supplemental county state funding for assessors. And the purpose of that money is to help assessors' offices do what they need to improve the assessment role. The program is not built like the early programs used to be, where we had a guaranteed amount. There's a $5 million amount in the budget trailer bill. So it's capped at $5 million for all 58 counties to compete for. The funds have to be used to supplement but not supplant existing funding for the department. The assessor must match the program funds at a rate of 1 to 2, which means the state will give us $2, we have to give $1 to match. In order to compete for this, I will need a resolution from your board authorizing that I can compete for those funds and agreeing to make that match in the final budget. All counties can compete for this, but no county can get more than $750,000. So remember that brass ring. And it can be used not only for staffing, but also for equipment. I would hope that we would be able to bring back a resolution for your approval. The CAO and I had talked about whether or not it should be in 2 weeks or whether or not it should be in July, and I will leave that up to you to let us know. If you would like that resolution to come back in 2 weeks, we can certainly make that happen.
Is there a deadline?
There are deadlines.
Yeah.
This particular budget trailer bill was just amended by the Assembly yesterday. They did not remove the funding for assessors, so obviously we're tracking it every day. The California Assessors Association has been working with the Department of Finance to try and find a way to have the state help fund assessors' offices. And as I think you know, as I told you a few months ago, I am currently the president-elect of the California Assessors Association, so this is one of those programs that's been on my radar screen to help work with. The expectation is that when this trailer bill is approved, it's going to put the Department of Finance in motion. They're expected to issue applications in early August for return back in September. They hope to notify selected program participants by October 1st of 2018, and then funding will be authorized and released on October 10th. If the assessor of a county that successfully competes for the money does not meet those requirements, the county will be required to give the money back. So I'm requesting respectfully that your board authorize application for those funds. The other thing that I would like to do as part of that funding proposal is ask for funds to scan our files. There are 2 reasons for the file scanning project. One is Butte Fire, and the other is simply real estate. I have 27 file cabinets in my office containing more than 50,000 files of property owners. I have about 22,000 Social Security numbers in my office. It is really important to me to have security and backup. When the Butte Fire came within a half mile of Government Center, the thing that kept me up all night was, what am I going to do if we lose those real property and business property files? There was absolutely no way to replicate that. When you combine that with the fact that we're going to be out of space if we start bringing people in to the office as we so desperately need, we're not going to have places to put them. So this file scanning project is, I think, really critical. And having a program where the state might help fund some of that effort is a really good idea, in my opinion. So I'll just briefly tell you about one other thing that I put in my budget request so that next year it's not a real surprise to you. It has to do with employee retention and longevity. One of the things that the sheriff brought up that I'm bringing up is how hard it is to retain people when those job advertisements are coming out from other counties. And I know in my heart that when the county is using Amador and Tuolumne County and Mendocino, maybe in Humboldt, you're using counties that we don't compete with for people. My people do not leave and go to Tuolumne or Amador County. My people leave and go to Stanislaus County, they go to San Joaquin County, they go to Sacramento County, and they go to Placer County. And it shouldn't be too hard for you to figure out that the reason they go to those counties is they get more money there. So we have to figure out a way, I think, to retain employees. And what I've proposed, and I'd like you to consider looking at it, not necessarily as part of this budget submission, but I'd like you to start thinking about it, is the longevity system that Yuba County uses. Yuba County's longevity system, essentially, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, but I can't think of another way to say it, it sucks employees in, they keep getting regular increases as a bonus for staying, and pretty soon they can't afford to leave. And that pretty soon is about 6 or 7 years. And that's the point at which you've got a really well-performing, well-trained employee, and you want to keep them. So I think what we've got to do is start looking outside the box at some of these ways to keep people. We have to start looking at ways that we can start compensating our employees fairly. But in the meantime, I'm just so very thankful, Mr. Lutz, that you were willing to recommend those 2 positions and consider that 3rd position as a limited term with the funding from the state. And what I'd like the board to do is tell me when you want me to come back with a resolution authorizing me to apply for those funds.
Well, we can certainly poll the board for that right now, if you'd like. Supervisor Clapp?
Yeah, I'd hate to leave $2 on the table I could pick up for $1.
Okay. Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor Oliveira?
I go for it.
Supervisor Karamanian?
I'm fine, but, you know, if you divide it by 58, that 5 million is only 86,000, and LA is going to take at least one of those million.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because LA competed in the last round of grant funding and they didn't succeed. But more importantly, I think, and if you weren't watching my campaign for the last 6 months, I'll just give you a little backward-looking preview. We have a huge backlog in my office. That backlog has increased exponentially because of staffing and because of the other issues that we faced with the Butte Fire. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to figure out a way to compete successfully and show the state what they want to see. And what the Department of Finance wants to see is they want to see, what are you going to do for us? Because they fund schools, and they want to see that 2/3 of every property tax dollar helping their bottom line. I'm pretty sure we've got a good case to get as much of this funding as possible.
I won't oppose it.
And I'm a yes, and I'll leave it to you and the CAO to work out when it comes back to the board.
Okay.
Okay?
I just don't want to take extra time of yours, say in July or August, when I have to have it, if bringing it back in 2 weeks would be helpful.
Whatever you two work out is fine.
Thank you.
I do have some questions.
Oh,
That's all right.
okay.
And I support, I mean, you're a revenue generator, and going through this, we know we've got to generate revenue, so. But I do have a question. In the reclassification of the cat stall specialist, what's the GIS section? And what do you, I know we have a GIS department, so
We do.
maybe you could break that out for me. Are we duplicating efforts?
We are not.
Help me understand that.
Well, we're not, because the law says that my responsibility as the county assessor is to maintain assessment maps. And currently, the way I maintain assessment maps is using an AutoCAD program to create the maps, and then we push them over to GIS, and they marry that to the parcel fabric. I've talked to GIS about the fact that they should give me a copy of the parcel fabric, and we should be going directly to the parcel fabric to make our changes, and I should get my person trained to do that. And I can tell you that the GIS coordinator and his cohort said, I'm not going to allow that. I can tell you that from my perspective, it's important that I maintain the assessment maps in the most efficient way possible. And I firmly believe that that is in the Esri products that GIS is using. So we're probably going to have some behind-the-scenes arguments. This reclassification recognizes that we have historically used both CAD and GIS products, and it is my intent to start moving us to that GIS platform so that we can work a little bit more seamlessly with other county departments. So departments like the Sheriff's Office use those GIS maps, and they should be married to our parcel data and the parcel fabric that we are creating. This reclassification recognizes the work that my mappers do and recognizes those qualifications, how they relate to the GIS coordinator and GIS technician.
I understand what you're saying. It sounds like there's a personality issue here. I have grave concerns about having too many people making maps.
I agree.
I like a centralized map where people go, if there's assessor's map and then a GIS map, information technology, that could breed confusion. So, I hope that, and we'll discuss this tomorrow, but I would hope that this is something, if you need the cattle stall, okay, you know your business. But if we've got too many people making these maps, I see that as a real future problem, if not competition with each other. And that's something that in our family, we need to work out this difference.
I completely agree with you, Supervisor Garamendi. Because the law says that my requirement is to maintain assessment maps, I firmly believe that that rests with my department. I understand what GIS is doing with the other layers and the pretty colors on those maps. As it comes to the parcel fabric, however, and the tax rate layer, those really belong with my department. And I will tell you that having someone in another department do a task that we can't control the timing of is very problematic for us in terms of producing the assessment roll.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, when we talk budget, design detail tomorrow, I want you
got
guys to work it out, because I see down the road 2 or 3 steps a problem.
We called the meeting. We're not letting it go.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Davis. You noted on page 158, or on our page 158, that in 2014 with the Assessors Partnership Program, that the county did not participate in the program, even though there was a 1-to-1 match on that. Do you know how much was involved in that we could have picked up?
I believe Tuolumne County, who is one of the small, that particular program was set up as a pilot program with 3 small counties, 3 medium-sized counties, and 3 large counties. The 3 small counties included Tuolumne, and I believe Tuolumne got a little over $300,000 in that particular program. We did not apply because we simply did not have the personnel to deal with all of the paperwork and the reporting back to the Department of Finance. I've decided that we've got to do something to help you, help me move that department forward. And so if we're going to have to jump through all these hoops, then we're going to have to jump through those hoops.
Now, at mid-year, you were in a staffing crunch, pretty much, and that's been corrected.
Actually, by mid-year, I was fully staffed.
Fully staffed?
Yes.
And, because I remember starting, at some point, you were at almost half staff.
I've been fully staffed since November.
And that had to have an impact too, because you're bringing in new people, you're trying to get them up to speed, and that creates a whole different set of work profiles that slows your whole productivity system down.
Indeed, it does. And additionally, if you look at the org chart that you have in your binder, which, by the way, I will tell you is just a little bit off, it shows an extra person on it that we took out, and I don't know how you got the wrong one. I have 4 appraiser 1s, and those are trainees. So you are quite correct in saying that causes a completely different set of issues and challenges for us to deal with. I'm so proud of how well they're doing. All of my new appraisers have taken their tests. They're all certified. At this point, I only have 2 assessment techs who have not yet gone through certification. So I'm super proud of how well my staff is doing, and we are really making great strides, I think.
So you basically stood up, in essence, almost a whole new department over
Well,
the last 12 months.
Not completely. I do have a number of people. I mean, I have probably the longest-serving employee at Calaveras County in my office with 40-plus years of experience. So we do have a lot of very good experience in my department. But as you said, even if we've got that experience, when we are constantly helping someone to understand the intricacies of what we do, then that drags down our productivity.
Correct. Thank you. I just wanted to point those out.
Any other board questions?
I just wanted to add, if Supervisor Garamendi had any questions on the GIS side and integration, I don't know if you want to address that tonight or not, but Mr. Moore came huffing it up here or hoofing
Yeah,
it
no,
up here.
I mean, my point is not that I need to understand GIS or I need to be in your business. I don't think that's my role. I think my role is to say, I don't need two competing empires on a really great product that people value. I'm concerned.
I totally get your point. I'm concerned as well. And I think Mr. Moore has come to meetings. I think we're trying to work it through at the department head level, and I think we will get this resolved.
That'd be great.
I have every confidence he and I will be able to work together and get it resolved.
That's super, because that saves us some cash.
Anything else?
Yeah, Ms. Davis, thank you for coming. Ms. Davis, a real quick question. In your goals and objectives, how big is our backlog now? He says decrease the backlog.
Well, we had hoped to have a number for at least my management team today, but we've had a little computer hiccup in the last week with some table downloads. So I want to say we have about 4,000 reappraisable events that still need to be valued, which means we will go into the 2019 assessment year continuing to value almost everything by roll correction. So
You
being
mentioned
able-
computer backup. Are you
Pardon?
requesting it? You mentioned a computer glitch. I understand we had a problem like that in the past 6 months
It's
or
not,
so.
no, it's not like that.
Not related?
It's not even close to that.
Okay.
The problem that we're having is IT downloads tables for me every night so that I'm not tapping a live database, because if I were tapping a live database, the potential for disaster would be.
Is this a big computer problem?
No, at this point, we're working with our vendor to try to figure out what happened. They're not able to download a certain table. It's causing the job to not work properly, and so we're not able to get our statistics out.
So
The-
4,000 is kind of an estimated guess.
It's it's a guess, but it's a very, very close guess.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Stanley, did you want to say anything? You got up and ran over here, you're out of breath, you're sitting there.
Well, that's okay, I've got my breath back. Stan Moore, IT and GIS. Just want to make sure that everyone understands that IT and GIS, we absolutely understand what the law requires, what the assessor has spoken about. We are all here to support the needs of the county, and there are certainly ways that I've been in discussion with the assessor. I've been in discussion with the GIS team in terms of how we can work together with GIS skills to the betterment of the county. So there are ways that this absolutely can be made to happen, and we are all going to work together to make that happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Supervisor.
All right, at this point, we are going to adjourn for the evening. And can you turn your microphone on, please?
Can we meet Thursday instead of tomorrow?
I think we've already have it posted. It's already on that we're going to meet tomorrow. At this point, public-wise, so it's going to be tomorrow at 9 a.m. We will come back and reopen the hearing and have public comments and then go into deliberations. Okay? We stand adjourned for today.